Hi guys, tonight we're drifting back, way back, to a world that feels both impossibly distant and strangely familiar. You're standing in the amber twilight of Rome, the kind that paints every marble column honey gold and makes even cracked plaster glow like something sacred. The air smells faintly of olive wood smoke, slow-cooked bread, and the salt carried inland from the sea. It's warm, still, and so very calm. You could almost forget this is a city that once ruled everything it could see, and quite a bit it couldn't. The world's first true superpower. You probably wouldn't survive the plumbing, but otherwise, it's surprisingly peaceful. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights and let yourself drift into the slow pulse of the Roman evening. You are walking along a broad road paved with ancient basalt stone. Beneath your sandals, it feels uneven but familiar, shaped by countless feet that have walked this same stretch before you. The city breathes around you, the last sunlight glancing off bronze helmets, off temple roofs, off fountains carved into faces that have been crying water for centuries. Rome at dusk is less a place than a mood, a living exhale of power settling into the quiet of night. You pass under an arch, its reliefs catching the light, each figure frozen in a story you don't quite know but somehow understand. The stone feels cool under your fingertips. If you close your eyes, you can still sense the hum of footsteps and distant chatter, the empire at twilight, when its people have worked, worshipped, argued, and eaten, and now settle into soft candlelight and murmured conversation. A mainstream historical fact drifts into view here. By the 2nd century CE, this empire stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, covering nearly a quarter of the world's population. Rome was the beating heart of it all, home to more than 1 million souls, the largest city humanity had yet managed to build. Imagine that, 1 million lives intertwined in the same smoky twilight. But for all its might, the empire also loved calm. The Romans valued otium, a word that meant leisure, but not idleness. It was a sacred pause between labours, the art of existing gracefully in stillness. You see it in their villas, their gardens, their poetry. You might even feel it now, in the soft rhythm of your own breathing. A curious tidbit stirs with the evening air. Some Romans believed that the city itself slept. They swore that if you stood still in the Forum long enough after sunset, you could hear Rome dreaming, a subtle vibration underfoot, the pulse of its 1,000 fires. It sounds poetic, but who's to say it wasn't true? After all, the city was alive in ways that went far beyond human imagination. Historians still argue whether the Romans saw themselves as masters of peace or merely caretakers of order. The truth, like most things here, lies somewhere between. What's undeniable is how deliberately they built calm into chaos. Aqueducts to soothe thirst, laws to tame impulse, rituals to domesticate fear. The empire may have thrived on conquest, but it survived on routine, on a collective belief that every citizen, from senator to street vendor, had their place in the long, slow heartbeat of Rome. You walk toward the Tiber, where twilight softens into silver. Lanterns sway above doorways. Somewhere a baker laughs. Somewhere a child's wooden toy clatters over the stones. The scent of warm grain lingers in the air, mingling with the resinous smoke of pine torches. A flock of starlings wheels above the rooftops, those same birds that once startled Emperor Nero during one of his less successful concerts, if you can believe it. You pause beside a fountain. The water trickles from a marble lion's mouth into a basin worn smooth by centuries of touch. You run your fingers through it, and for a moment, you imagine how many others have done the same. Soldiers, lovers, thieves, slaves, senators. Every droplet of water here has brushed against history. A warm wind drifts up from the south. It carries the faint murmur of languages, Latin, Greek, Egyptian, and a few you don't even recognize. Rome is nothing if not a collection of borrowed sounds. Each tongue adds texture to the city's lullaby, a reminder that empires are built as much on whispers as on wars. You glance toward the Palatine Hill, glowing faintly in the half-light. That's where emperors live. Augustus, Tiberius, maybe even Hadrian. You picture them looking down at this very hour, sipping watered wine, perhaps thinking about the same thing you are. How vast this all feels, and how temporary. Empires rise, empires rest, and eventually, even marble turns to dust. But for now, In this perfect dusk, everything seems eternal. You pass a column topped with an eagle, its wings spread wide, its shadow slicing across the square. The sky deepens to a darker blue, and torches flare to life. Somewhere, a lyre begins to play, a soft tune that drifts through the arches like smoke. A woman hums along. A man claps quietly in rhythm. You feel your steps slow. There's no rush here, no reason to think of tomorrow. Rome at twilight invites you to listen, to the hiss of oil lamps, to the creak of cartwheels, to your own heartbeat matching the rhythm of an empire gone still. You could stay here forever, drifting between the glow of the past and the hush of sleep. You might even wonder what the world sounded like when this empire finally slept, when its fires dimmed and its streets fell silent. The truth is, it never truly did. Somewhere, always, a poet was writing, a guard was pacing, a lover was whispering beneath a balcony. The empire at twilight is an empire breathing, and as you breathe with it, you feel yourself sliding into that same calm rhythm, centuries dissolving around you, the world softening to amber haze. Tomorrow, you'll walk those streets more closely. You'll hear the laughter in the markets, the splash of baths, the sigh of soldiers on watch. But for now, stay here, in the exhale of history, safe, quiet, and still. The streets of Rome stretch ahead like veins of soft light, still glowing from the last touch of sunset. You walk slowly now, feeling the city settle into itself. The stones beneath your feet are warm from the day, holding the memory of 1,000 footsteps. Each one tells a story that's already fading into the hum of night. You drift past rows of tall brick buildings leaning slightly inward, their upper stories heavy with laundry lines. The scent of baked bread and olive oil lingers in the air. A cart creaks as it turns down a narrow lane, pulled by a sleepy mule whose bell gives a single, patient chime. The sounds of Rome after dusk are never quite silent, but they move slower, softer, like the breathing of something immense that's finally resting. You reach a crowded market square, now half asleep. The stalls are closing, canvas flapping in the faint breeze from the river. A few vendors still linger, their voices tired, but friendly. One sells dates and figs, another stacks small clay lamps filled with oil. A third, with a face tanned like leather, murmurs prayers to Mercury as he locks away his money box. You nod as you pass. Everyone in this city, no matter how small their trade, belongs to a story bigger than themselves. It's strange to think that most Romans lived lives closer to yours than to their emperors. They woke early, complained about work, gossiped, loved, lost, and went to sleep, hoping tomorrow would be easier. The world has changed, but not that much. A mainstream historical fact slips into your mind. More than 90% of Rome's population lived in cramped apartment buildings called insulae. Some rose 6 or 7 stories high, fragile wooden structures that leaned precariously against their neighbours. Fires were constant, noise was endless, and the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbour arguing about bread prices or reciting poetry at dawn. Yet there was comfort here too. People knew one another's rhythms, shared water from the same well, helped lift baskets to the higher balconies with ropes. When evening came, they sat on the steps together, chatting about chariot races or the latest scandal from the forum. You imagine the warmth of it all, that gentle murmur that fills the space between exhaustion and sleep. A quirky tidbit floats in as you walk. Roman bakers, it seems, sometimes used urine to whiten their togas. It sounds bizarre now, but ammonia was their secret cleaning agent. They even had public collection points where passers-by could donate. Emperor Vespasian once taxed this trade, which gave rise to the saying, "Pecunia non ole," money does not stink. You smile to yourself. Even in ancient Rome, the economy never rested. Historians still argue whether the average Roman citizen felt truly part of the empire or merely tolerated it. Was loyalty built on pride or on the daily bread handed out to keep the peace? Maybe it doesn't matter. What mattered to most was the here and now, the shared rhythm of the city, the tiny joys that stitched each evening together. You stop beside a small street shrine set into the wall. A little statue of a household god peers out from behind flickering candles. Someone has left a few coins, a fig, and a sprig of rosemary. You can almost hear the whispered wish that came with it. Rome might have seemed enormous and grand, but its soul lived in these small acts of faith, repeated night after night, in streets where laughter met prayer. You take a turn down an alley lined with faded frescoes. One still shows a feast, painted in red and ochre. The faces are half gone now, but the joy remains. The laughter of the painted guests seems to echo softly in the air. Somewhere above, a woman's voice hums a tune while she folds linen. A cat leaps gracefully from one roof to another. Life continues in layers, gentle and steady. A faint breeze stirs your hair as you cross a small bridge. The Tiber below murmurs like a lullaby, carrying the city's reflections in its dark surface. It smells faintly of reeds and wet stone. A fisherman sits with a simple line dropped into the current, his silhouette quiet and timeless. You could swear he hasn't moved for centuries. To your left, you see the shadow of the Capitoline Hill, its temples outlined against the rising moon. Somewhere up there, guards exchange tired greetings. Their torches glimmer like stars, watching over a city that never really sleeps. You realize how much of Rome's magic lies not in its monuments, but in its movement, the soft choreography of ordinary lives brushing past one another. You pause before a doorway where two boys play a simple dice game. They look up, grin, and offer you a throw. You decline, smiling back. Their laughter follows you as you continue. Dice clatter against the stone, the same sound that's echoed here for 2,000 years. As you pass through another archway, you glance back at the street you've just left. The lamplight catches the edges of doorways and turns them golden. The quiet is deep now, but never empty. It's filled with all the stories the city keeps safe for the night. You take a slow breath. The air is warm and heavy with the scent of olive smoke and baking grain. The world seems to move at half speed. You feel your shoulders loosen, your pulse slowing to match the rhythm of the ancient streets. Rome at night isn't grand or loud. It's a lullaby built of footsteps, laughter, and the slow hush of closing shutters. You could stay here forever, listening to the city sigh itself to sleep. The sound of trickling water greets you before the steam does. You follow it down a marble corridor, past walls veined with green stone, and lamps flickering in bronze holders. The air grows thick, moist, and sweet with oils of rose and pine. You are entering the baths, the most peaceful sanctuary in all of Rome. The empire might roar with ambition, but here it hums with serenity. You step into the apoditerium, the changing room. Voices echo gently off marble, not loud enough to disturb the calm. Men chat lazily, while attendants fold linen towels and guard baskets of clothing. A few splash cool water on their faces before entering the warm chambers. The air smells faintly of olive soap and cedar. You move forward barefoot, the smooth floor almost slippery beneath you. The first chamber you enter glows softly with lamplight reflected on steam. This is the tepidarium, the warm room, meant to ease the body into comfort. You breathe in deeply and feel the damp air settle in your lungs. The sound of dripping water, the faint scrape of a strigil, the low murmur of voices, all blend into one soothing rhythm. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Roman baths were not merely for washing. They were social centers, often enormous complexes that included libraries, gardens, and gyms. The baths of Caracalla alone could hold over 1,600 bathers at once. Imagine that. The empire's daily stress dissolving into scented vapor. You step further in. The walls are painted with dolphins and seashells, their colors still vibrant in the shifting light. A slave ladles warm water into a basin for an old senator whose wrinkled skin glows gold in the steam. He closes his eyes, sighs, and mutters something about the gods being kind tonight. You notice the sound of laughter coming from a nearby doorway. Two friends are playfully arguing over philosophy, their voices relaxed, unhurried. It feels timeless, this mix of talk and warmth. Here, everyone sheds more than their clothes. They shed rank, politics, and the dust of ambition. A quirky tidbit floats to you through the mist. Romans sometimes used crushed seashells and even crocodile dung as an early form of exfoliation. Strange, perhaps, but they swore it worked. The spa industry, it seems, has always been a little eccentric. Historians still argue whether the baths were truly egalitarian spaces or if they subtly reinforced class divisions. Some claim that senators and slaves bathed side by side. Others point to the separate entrances and finer oils reserved for the wealthy. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. As it often does with Rome, equality was rarely perfect, but the illusion of it was soothing. You pass into the caldarium, the hot room, where the floor radiates heat from furnaces below. The air thickens until it almost pulses. A few bathers lie on marble benches, eyes closed, arms loose at their sides. Someone pours a ladle of water onto a heated stone, and a soft hiss fills the air. You feel your muscles melt. The Roman heating system, the hypercaust, was an engineering marvel. Hot air moved through channels beneath the floor, warming the stone without any visible flame. It was genius, and it made Roman winters almost pleasant. You think of how the same principle is used in modern underfloor heating. History lingers under our feet. Literally, a woman's voice filters in from the adjoining section of the baths. She hums an old song, her tone light and steady. For a moment, you imagine the baths as one enormous heartbeat, pulsing with the lives of everyone within. A senator sighs, a baker jokes, a philosopher closes his eyes. Their differences dissolve into warmth and water. You dip your hands into the pool beside you. The heat is almost perfect. Tiny ripples shimmer across the surface, reflecting the lamplight like liquid gold. The water smells faintly of lavender, perhaps added by an attendant who wanted to impress someone important. You lean back against the marble and listen. Every sound is soft, rounded by steam. The occasional splash feels distant, like rain falling in another lifetime. Outside, the city continues its restless rhythm, but inside the baths, time thickens and slows. The Romans called this balance temperantia, the perfect state between too hot and too cold, too busy and too idle. The idea wasn't to escape life, but to pause it, to float just long enough to remember what peace feels like. You picture Emperor Hadrian visiting his favorite baths after a long day of governance. He too would have stepped into this same haze, allowed himself to forget the weight of borders and wars for an hour or two. Maybe he even stared at the same flicker of firelight reflected in the water. Somewhere nearby, a servant pours oil into a shallow dish. Its scent fills the air with sweetness. He begins to massage the shoulders of a weary traveller, scraping away the oil and dust with a curved bronze strigil. The sound of it, soft and rhythmic, feels like a lullaby for the senses. You close your eyes for a moment. The heat wraps around you. Every muscle softens. You can almost hear your heartbeat slow to match the drip of water and the sigh of steam. The world outside has faded completely. If peace could take physical form, it would look like this: soft light, slow breath, warm stone. The knowledge that life, no matter how vast, always returns to stillness. When you finally stand, your skin glows, your thoughts clear. You move toward the exit, passing a wall painted with ocean waves. A slave opens a door to let in a cool breeze, and the sudden freshness makes your skin tingle. You step into the night again, hair damp, spirit quiet, the scent of cedar still clinging to you. The baths behind you sigh as the steam drifts upward into the starlit Roman sky. You can almost believe the city is exhaling through them, letting go of the day's weight, one drop of water at a time. You step away from the warmth of the baths and into a gentler night. The air feels cool on your skin, carrying the faint scent of fig trees and oil lamps. Above you, the stars begin to scatter more thickly across the Roman sky, each one reflected in the slow movement of the Tiber. You follow the rhythm of your footsteps, steady and calm, until the city's pulse seems to match your own. Tonight, you find yourself wondering about sleep itself. The Romans were fascinated by it. They thought of it not as a simple rest, but as a divine state, halfway between the world of the living and that of the gods. Many believed that dreams were messages sent by deities, or sometimes by the spirits of ancestors who wandered through the night, looking for open minds to whisper into. According to what most historians agree, people prayed to Somnus, the god of sleep, before closing their eyes. His temples were quiet places, filled with incense and cool marble floors, where the faithful would lie down to dream sacred dreams. It is well recorded that sleep in ancient Rome was rarely long or deep. Most Romans rested in two stages, falling asleep soon after sunset, waking for an hour or two in the middle of the night to read, talk, or simply watch the stars, then drifting back to bed until dawn. It sounds unusual to modern ears, but even today, scientists find hints that this broken rhythm might have once been humanity's natural pattern. Perhaps you felt it too, that soft awareness in the middle of the night, when the world feels paused and safe. A peculiar custom might make you smile here. Wealthy Romans sometimes slept with tiny wax or clay figures beside them, shaped like protective household gods. They believed these figures absorbed bad dreams, holding them quietly until morning when light would dissolve them. The figures were often kept cool in bowls of rosewater through the day, so that when brought to bed, they smelled faintly of gardens. You can almost sense that perfume now, mingling with the sound of distant lyres and the sigh of the wind through olive branches. Even after centuries, the question still lingers about how the Romans interpreted their dreams. Some claim to receive instructions from Jupiter himself, while others treated dreams like riddles, to be interpreted by professional dream readers. Records from physicians like Galen even mention herbal mixtures meant to calm restless minds, from crushed poppy seeds to infusions of chamomile and mint. Sleep was a sacred art, a bridge between reason and mystery. You imagine yourself in a Roman bedroom. The walls are painted with gentle reds and soft blues, showing mythic scenes that glow faintly in the lamplight. The bed is low, made of wood and leather straps, covered with linen sheets that smell faintly of smoke from the oil lamps. Outside, a fountain murmurs. Someone is whispering a prayer in another room. It feels timeless, the same kind of peace you find when the house around you finally stops moving. According to contemporary records, Romans were practical about comfort. They kept small, ceramic bottles of oil near their beds to rub on their skin after a day in the sun. Some even believed a light coating of olive oil protected them from nightmares. You smile, imagining a society where self-care was both superstition and luxury. A small breeze moves through the shutters. You hear it lift the edge of a curtain and rustle the woven mat beneath your feet. Somewhere outside, a cartwheel creaks as the last vendor heads home. The sound fades into the hum of crickets. Sleep in Rome was also a matter of class. The wealthy reclined in spacious rooms decorated with frescoes, while most citizens dozed in narrow apartments, sometimes sharing a single bed with family or friends. It was common, even expected. The warmth of another person was comfort against the night air and the echo of the city. Yet everyone, rich or poor, shared the same quiet longing for peace at the end of the day. No one is entirely sure if the Romans truly dreamed differently from us, but it's tempting to believe they did. Maybe their dreams were filled with marble corridors, temple bells, and long Mediterranean journeys. Or maybe they dreamed of the same things you do: safety, warmth, and the hope that morning would arrive gently. You step outside again, the night air cooler now. The Tiber moves quietly beneath a sky scattered with light. You imagine the city asleep in its layers, every dream floating upward like mist. In a way, Rome is still dreaming. It has never truly awakened from its past. You can almost feel it breathing in rhythm with you. The lamps along the street flicker, and you pause to watch the reflection shimmer on the cobblestones. The warmth from the baths has faded from your skin, but a calmer warmth remains deep inside. You have seen how even an empire needed rest, how even power found peace in the silence between breaths. You walk a little further and look back at the faint glow of windows across the river. Somewhere out there, a poet lies awake, listening to the same night you do. History quietly confirms that peace is never lost. It only changes shape, and with that thought, you breathe in slowly and let the calm of the Roman night fold around you like soft linen. Sleep feels near, patient, and kind. The night deepens as you wander closer to the heart of the city. Ahead, a low hum gathers and swells. Not chaotic, but alive in a way only Rome can be. You follow it instinctively until the streets open into a vast square, bathed in the glow of hundreds of oil lamps. This is the Forum, the restless soul of the empire. Even at this hour, it refuses to sleep entirely. You pause at the edge of the marble pavement. The air feels cooler here, drifting gently through the open arches. Voices rise and fall like the tide, soft but steady. Someone is finishing a speech under one of the porticos, his tone low and persuasive, while a few listeners nod drowsily, half interested, half dreaming. In the distance, a mule brays. The sound echoes off the temples like a lonely note in an endless song. Few people realize that the Roman Forum was not only a political center, but also a social one. During the day, it rang with the noise of merchants, lawyers, and priests. But at night, it turned into something gentler. Lovers walked under the colonnades, musicians practiced in the corners, and philosophers argued about fate while eating roasted chestnuts. Even the marble seemed to glow differently after sunset, as if it too preferred the calm of the dark. A curious little detail hides among the stones. Some of the oldest pavements in the Forum were said to have a faint hum at night. People claimed it was the trapped air beneath the slabs or the murmurs of spirits wandering between temples. Children were told that if they pressed their ears to the ground, they could hear the gods speaking through the earth. You might smile at the thought, but when the square is this quiet, you could almost believe it. Experts remain divided on whether the Forum ever truly emptied. Ancient writings describe the guards who patrolled through the hours before dawn, stopping occasionally to warm their hands over braziers. Others suggest there was always someone awake, someone keeping watch over the flames at the altars of Vesta. The truth lingers somewhere between the two ideas, a gentle reminder that even empires have their insomniacs. You walk toward a fountain shaped like a small sea monster. Water trickles softly from its mouth into a shallow pool, creating a rhythm that feels ancient and soothing. The sound blends with the echo of footsteps as another passerby crosses the square. You can smell the faint sweetness of figs from a nearby cart, left unattended for the night. It feels as if the entire city has slowed to a single heartbeat. It's well documented that this square was once the center of all Roman life. Every law, every announcement, every piece of gossip began here. You picture senators in their white togas gathering beneath the basilicas, the sun catching on their rings. You imagine orators like Cicero standing where you stand now, their words flying into the air like sparks before dissolving into silence. And though centuries have passed, their voices seem to linger in the stones beneath your feet. A soft breeze stirs the torches. The flames flicker and dance across carved reliefs, showing soldiers, gods, and triumphal parades. For a moment, the figures seem alive again. One goddess raises her hand as if to bless the night. You tilt your head and almost expect her to move. No one is entirely sure how the Romans managed to keep this space so orderly. Some credit their intricate laws, others point to superstition and sheer habit. Perhaps it was both. They feared chaos as much as they adored beauty, and the Forum was where those two forces met. Every column, every statue, every carefully measured step was a way of taming the wildness of life. A pair of musicians enter the square, their footsteps soft on the stone. One carries a small lyre, the other a reed flute. They sit near a column and begin to play. The notes rise, faint and bright, swirling upward until they dissolve into the sky. The melody is slow, wistful, and strangely familiar. It feels like the sound of memory itself. You find a marble step and sit for a while. The air carries traces of smoke, fruit, and distant rain. The city feels half asleep now, neither fully awake nor gone to rest. Somewhere an owl calls from a rooftop. You look up and see it glide silently across the moonlight, its wings cutting through history as easily as air. History quietly reminds us that Rome's power was built not only on might, but also on routine. Every day, people gathered here to argue, to listen, to believe that words could shape destiny. The Forum was both heartbeat and mirror, showing the empire to itself. You stay there until the music fades. The musicians pack up their instruments and vanish into the alleys, leaving only the memory of their tune. The square seems even more peaceful now, as if holding its breath. You touch the cool edge of the fountain and let the night wrap around you. In this place, where every whisper once carried weight, you feel the difference between noise and sound, between power and presence. The Forum no longer rules the world, but it still knows how to lull it into quiet awe. When you finally rise to leave, the first faint hint of dawn brushes the horizon. The marble shines pale, like a seashell catching morning light. You take one last look at the square, at the stillness that holds 1,000 forgotten voices, and continue walking. The first trace of dawn lingers at the edge of the sky, a faint silver that softens the shapes of rooftops and pillars. You walk slowly toward the scent of warmth. Something earthy and inviting drifts through the narrow streets. Before long, you find the source, a small bakery already awake before the sun. The door is open just enough to let out a thin ribbon of steam and the sweet, heavy smell of bread. Inside, the baker hums as he works, moving with the calm precision of someone who has done this every morning of his life. His hands move through flour and dough, like waves through sand. It is well recorded that bread was the heartbeat of Roman life. Bakers were so essential that some were granted citizenship, even if they were born slaves. Their craft fed soldiers, senators, and the poor alike. You step closer and watch as he slides a flat loaf into a clay oven, glowing faintly red. The air feels soft and thick. A few others arrive, greeting him quietly, trading copper coins for small, round loaves still warm from the fire. They tear them apart with their hands, dipping pieces into olive oil flavored with garlic and herbs. The sound of crust breaking is subtle and comforting, like a whisper of contentment. A lesser-known habit from those days whispers that Romans often began their mornings with nothing more than bread, cheese, and watered wine. Simplicity was considered virtue, especially before noon. Even the wealthy tried to appear modest in their early meals, though their kitchens were anything but humble. Imagine marble counters, silver dishes, and servants slicing figs so delicately that their hands barely touch the fruit. Some say one thing, others quietly disagree about how the common people truly ate. Ancient writings mention barley porridge for the poor, while archaeological evidence shows traces of imported spices even in simple households. Maybe it depended on the day. Maybe, as with most of life, food reflected hope more than circumstance. You take a piece of warm bread and taste it slowly. The crust is crisp, the inside soft and fragrant. It tastes like comfort, like the kind of peace that has no need for grand gestures. Olive oil drips onto your fingers, smooth and golden. Nearby, a small clay jar holds black olives, and another contains crushed salt from the coast. You dip again, letting the flavors blend on your tongue. The Romans believed food carried the character of its land. Olive trees meant patience, grapes meant joy, grain meant strength. To eat was not simply to fill the stomach, but to take in the spirit of the earth itself. You can almost feel it in the air, that reverence for simple nourishment. According to contemporary records, bakers often used different grains depending on the region and season. Some breads were mixed with honey, others with poppy seeds or bits of dried fruit. Even soldiers carried small loaves into battle, often baking them on stones heated by their campfires. Bread was life, travel, faith, and reward all at once. An odd little detail hides here too. Romans sometimes used ashes from grapevines to whiten their flour, believing it added purity and good fortune. A strange thought, but one that fits their blend of superstition and science. Every loaf, in its way, was a quiet prayer. You wander back outside with your small breakfast. The streets are softer now, wrapped in morning mist. From a nearby doorway, a woman sells warm honey cakes. Children tug at her tunic, eager for crumbs. The world feels half awake, gently stretching into the day. You hear the clatter of carts beginning to move again, carrying olives, wine, and grain toward the forum. It is funny to think that the same empire that built aqueducts and amphitheatres also relied on such humble scenes to survive. The strength of Rome was baked, not forged. It rose with yeast and rested in ovens before feeding the world. You pause at the riverbank to eat the last bite of your bread. The Tiber ripples softly beside you, reflecting pale sunlight. A fisherman waves from a small wooden boat, tossing his net into the water. His movements are slow, unhurried. Life feels patient here, each moment folding gently into the next. Perhaps that is what Rome understood best, that peace often hides in ordinary things, a loaf of bread, a shared meal, a morning that begins quietly. Empires may fall, but the taste of olive oil on warm bread never changes. As you stand there, the city begins to brighten. Smoke curls upward from chimneys. The hum of voices grows a little stronger. The day begins, but you still feel the calm of the night clinging to you. The scent of baking lingers, soft and sweet. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. The heartbeat of Rome continues in the sound of footsteps, the creak of carts, and the steady rhythm of ovens. The world is waking, but not rushing. It moves with the same patience as dough rising in the dark. You smile, letting the warmth of the morning touch your face. Somewhere a rooster crows. Somewhere a baker hums again, starting another batch. And somewhere inside you, something settles, as if your own spirit has just been fed. The sun has climbed high, spilling soft light across the rooftops. You walk through a quieter part of the city now, where the hum of the market fades into birdsong. The air feels warm and full, touched by the scent of jasmine. Ahead lies a courtyard framed by tall cypress trees. Inside, laughter drifts like smoke. This is where Rome practices the art of leisure. You step through the gate and find people scattered on marble benches beneath awnings of woven cloth. Some play small board games with smooth stones. Others read poetry aloud, their voices mingling with the coo of doves. It is well documented in Roman writings that leisure was not idleness but virtue. To rest well was to live well. The philosopher Seneca wrote that time spent in reflection was time earned back from death itself. You imagine him here, eyes half closed, hands folded on his knees, listening to the rustle of leaves. A curious little practice might raise an eyebrow. Wealthy Romans often employed slaves whose only task was to remind their masters to relax. Their duty was to whisper gentle prompts like, "My lord, the afternoon cools," or "It is time to rest your thoughts." Strange, perhaps, but also a reminder of how deeply Rome valued the balance between work and stillness. Experts continue to puzzle over whether this cultural obsession with calm was genuine or merely a performance for status. Some evidence suggests the elite showed off their tranquility the same way they displayed their gardens and jewels. Yet, in the quieter corners of Rome, even the humblest people found ways to imitate that peace, pausing to sip watered wine or play with a stray cat in the shade. You wander past a group of women weaving garlands of flowers. Their fingers move with slow precision. They talk softly about the coming festival of Flora, goddess of blooms. The petals fall across their laps like fragments of sunlight. You can smell roses and fresh grass, the perfume of a city pretending, for a few hours, that life has no burdens. According to inscriptions found in ancient villas, Romans loved the phrase otium cum dignitate, leisure with dignity. It meant rest that nourished the mind, not indulgence, but grace. You picture a merchant setting aside his ledgers to listen to the distant sound of a fountain. You see a scholar rolling up a scroll and staring out a window, watching the light change on the wall. Even emperors, surrounded by chaos, tried to practice this art. Here's something wonderfully strange they used to do during those slow afternoons. Many Romans trained songbirds to recite fragments of poetry. The birds learned to mimic rhythm and tone, chirping lines from Virgil or Ovid to sleepy audiences. It must have sounded both charming and eerie, like the voices of forgotten poets fluttering in feathered bodies. You smile at the image, imagining the blend of birdsong and verse floating above the courtyard. The truth lingers somewhere between myth and memory about how long these quiet hours lasted. Some accounts say most citizens napped after lunch. Others describe courtyards filled with low conversation until twilight. Perhaps it changed with the season. What never changed was the intention behind it, the desire to pause the march of empire and listen to the stillness between breaths. A breeze moves through the courtyard now, stirring the fabric of the awnings. The light dances over the water in the small pool at the center. Someone drops a coin into it with a quiet wish. The ripples spread outward, slow and perfect. It is said that time itself slowed here. When the wind brushed the vines, or when the first fig fell from its stem, people believed they could feel the universe inhale. Maybe they were right. Maybe the world did move more gently when humans remembered to be still. A poet seated nearby begins to read aloud, his voice soft and low. He speaks of summer fading, of rivers turning golden at dusk. The sound seems to wash over everyone, a gentle current pulling you deeper into calm. You rest your elbows on the marble edge of the pool and watch the water shimmer. Leisure, in its truest Roman sense, was a kind of philosophy. It was not about wasting time, but about returning to yourself, untangling the noise of the day until only silence remained. It is easy to imagine how people here fell asleep to the hum of fountains, their dreams filled with sunlight and the scent of olive leaves. You rise slowly, stretching your arms as the poet finishes his verse. The courtyard is quieter now. The garland makers have gone, leaving petals scattered like soft confetti. You walk toward the gate again, passing beneath a line of vines heavy with grapes. The shade is cool and the air feels almost sacred in its stillness. As you step back onto the street, the noise of the city greets you again, but gently. You carry the calm of the courtyard with you, like a coin still warm in your palm. Somewhere behind you, another verse begins, and the voice drifts upward into the bright Roman sky. The afternoon sunlight fades into a softer hue as you leave the gardens behind. A hush settles over the streets, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the distant call of a horn from the barracks. You follow that sound, steady and measured, until it leads you to the city walls. The scent of metal and leather mingles with the cool evening breeze. You arrive at a quiet post where a small group of soldiers stands watch. Their armor catches the dim light, polished enough to reflect the last traces of the day. One of them adjusts his cloak and nods to you with a calm familiarity. These are not warriors in battle, but caretakers of peace. According to what ancient chroniclers recorded, the Roman army spent far more time maintaining order than fighting wars. Patrols, night watches, and guarding storehouses filled most of their days and nights. The rhythm of their movements is steady and hypnotic. A guard walks the perimeter, his footsteps crunching softly over gravel. Another leans against a wall, watching the horizon darken. They talk quietly about their families, their next leave, and the food waiting in the barracks. There is no urgency here, only the quiet discipline of people who have learned to live between danger and routine. A delightful oddity from the era was that soldiers often carried tiny charms for protection. Some wore bronze pendants shaped like phalluses, believed to ward off evil spirits. Others kept small carvings of animals tucked into their belts, each one meant to bring luck or courage. It sounds almost comical today, yet there is something endearing in their belief that such fragile tokens could keep them safe. The question remains uncertain, even after centuries, about how much these guards truly trusted their empire's promises. Some historians think they were fiercely loyal, bound by pay and pride. Others believed that homesickness tugged constantly at their hearts. Many of them were stationed far from where they were born, sometimes for 20 years at a time. In letters found buried beneath the sands of Egypt, Roman soldiers wrote of missing their vineyards, their mothers, even the smell of rain in their hometowns. The air cools as twilight thickens. You walk alongside the wall, tracing the deep grooves where the stones meet. Torches flicker to life along the rampart. The light glows against bronze helmets, making them appear golden for a moment before dimming again. You can hear the faint murmur of the city behind you and the open silence of the countryside ahead. Rome's reach feels infinite, yet the quiet at its edge is as intimate as a whisper. It is said that night watches were moments of meditation for many soldiers. They stood still, listening to the wind and the distant hoot of owls. Some would recite prayers to Mars or Jupiter, asking not for victory but for calm. The discipline of stillness was part of their strength. To stay awake while the world slept required a kind of patience that only repetition could teach. A curious little practice among them was writing poetry during long shifts. Archaeologists have found scratched verses on stone walls, rough but tender. One reads, "May sleep find me when duty ends, and peace find me after." It is both soldier's wish and philosopher's thought. You picture a young guard etching those words while his breath fogs the cold air. In a nearby tower, a soldier sharpens his sword by the light of a small lamp. The sound is soft, steady, almost rhythmic. The blade gleams as if it holds its own moonlight. He pauses to check the edge, then sets it aside with care. The metal, the lamp, and the silence all seem to share the same patient heartbeat. Records from ancient camps show that soldiers shared meals just before the deepest hours of the night. They would warm broth over coals, pass around hard bread, and talk softly about home. Some kept jars of olives or small pieces of cheese hidden for comfort. Even on duty, they found ways to feel human. You watch as one guard adjusts the torch at the gate. Sparks leap into the air and vanish. He glances at the stars, then at the road stretching outward into the darkness. Perhaps he wonders what travelers might come tonight, or what stories the next dawn will bring. The night grows colder. A dog barks somewhere beyond the wall, then falls silent again. You wrap your cloak tighter and feel the weight of calm settle over everything. The soldiers' voices fade into the background, replaced by the rhythm of boots against stone. It feels almost ceremonial, this quiet watch over a sleeping world. It strikes you that peace is rarely quiet by nature. It must be guarded to remain so. These men, often nameless and forgotten, kept the calm that allowed others to sleep safely. You breathe in, slowly, and feel a quiet gratitude for them. The last torch flares brighter, then steadies. The stars above seem close enough to touch. You stay there for a moment longer, letting the sound of the soldiers' steps lull you into stillness. Rome's pulse continues, measured and sure, beneath an ancient and endless sky. The night deepens, soft as velvet, as you drift away from the barracks and toward a hill dotted with villas. The air is scented with myrtle and warm stone that still holds the memory of the sun. You pass a gate where vines trail lazily across marble columns. Inside, a house glows with lamplight. The door is open, and a servant gestures for you to enter. You step quietly across a mosaic floor. The tiny tiles cool under your feet. It is well documented that the homes of wealthy Romans were built around open courtyards called atria. At the center stood a shallow pool that caught rainwater and moonlight in equal measure. Around it stretched walls painted in deep red, cobalt, and gold, depicting gods, banquets, and mythic beasts. The air carries the faint perfume of incense and beeswax from freshly polished furniture. A household slave moves silently across the room, carrying a silver tray filled with small cups of honeyed wine. Somewhere nearby, the soft pluck of a lyre hums through the air. You can almost hear the gentle buzz of conversation, the laughter that follows the end of a story. Wealth in Rome was not quiet by nature, but here, in this hour, it becomes subdued, half asleep. A tiny wonder from their world drifts into view. Wealthy families often sprinkled rose petals on their floors during evening gatherings, believing the scent would soothe guests and invite pleasant dreams later. Some even mixed crushed petals with vinegar and spread it on marble to create a perfume that lasted through the night. You can imagine the faint, sweet smell rising as feet brushed across the floor. Researchers have yet to agree on how sincere these households were in their pursuit of beauty. Some claim it was vanity disguised as virtue. Others believe it was genuine devotion to harmony. Perhaps it was both. The Romans built their homes like poems, each corner arranged to echo their vision of balance. Even their excess was deliberate, a dance between grandeur and grace. You wander through the corridors, past painted walls where cupids chase swans through clouds of blue. In one room, a bronze lamp burns steadily, its flame mirrored in a silver dish. A cat sleeps on a low couch, curled into a perfect spiral. A light breeze moves through the window, making the curtains sway like a sigh. Inscriptions found in ancient villas show how much effort went into creating serenity. Some walls bore short phrases such as "Hic habitat felicitas," which means "Here dwells happiness." Others displayed verses praising quiet nights, cool fountains, and faithful friends. These were not mere decorations but daily affirmations of peace. Here's something wonderfully strange they used to keep in these rooms. Many patricians kept miniature fountains indoors, often carved from alabaster or bronze. The soft trickle of water was said to attract good spirits and drive away envy. Archaeologists have found such fountains still intact, their pipes hidden behind plaster, their basins smooth from centuries of use. You listen now, and it is easy to believe the sound itself once carried comfort through sleepless hours. No one can say for sure if these great houses were truly restful or just carefully staged illusions. Behind the walls, servants hurried through endless chores, unseen but ever present. Outside, the cries of vendors and animals still reached faintly through the night. Yet within these chambers, the illusion of stillness was real enough to soothe even the most restless minds. You step into a triclinium, the dining room. The couches are low and wide, covered with soft cushions. The table glints with silver plates and bowls filled with fruit. Half-eaten figs glisten beside clusters of grapes. A few lamps flicker near the edges, their wicks bending toward the smallest breeze. The guests have gone, but the scent of cinnamon and roasted nuts still lingers. It is said that some Romans preferred to sleep right where they dined, too full of wine or comfort to move. Servants would quietly cover them with woolen blankets while clearing the dishes. You can almost see it now, a nobleman snoring gently as a candle burns low beside him. In the far corner of the room, an old statue of Apollo watches with its blank marble eyes. The shadows from the flame make it seem alive for an instant, as if it, too, is waiting for dawn. You move toward a terrace overlooking the garden. The night air flows in cool and fragrant, carrying the hum of crickets. Below, a narrow path winds through cypress and laurel, leading to a pond glinting with starlight. You rest your hands on the stone railing and let your gaze sink into the stillness. Somewhere far off, the city murmurs, but here, only the soft sounds of night remain. History quietly tells us that Roman luxury often served a deeper purpose. It was not only indulgence, but also a way to ward off the chaos that always threatened to return. In their pursuit of peace, they surrounded themselves with order, with rhythm, with beauty made solid. You turn to leave. Behind you, the lamps flicker once more. The pool in the atrium catches a final glint of starlight, and the faint trickle of water seems to whisper a blessing. The house sleeps again, its marble walls breathing in time with the quiet of the city. You leave the quiet luxury of the villa behind and wander downhill toward a humbler part of the city. The air changes here. The scent of incense fades, replaced by the smell of damp clay, cooking lentils, and smoke from small stoves. The walls close in, painted not with gods or heroes but with quick sketches of ships, hearts, and names scratched by hands that dreamed of being remembered. The narrow stairways twist upward toward the crowded insulae, the apartment blocks that hold most of Rome's people. Historical records indicate that these tall buildings sometimes leaned precariously, with wooden balconies sagging under the weight of laundry and potted herbs. Inside, families lived in tiny rooms with plaster walls the color of ash. A single window might look out over a maze of roofs and alleys. Yet, for all the noise and closeness, there is warmth here too, a comfort born from familiarity. As you step inside one of these apartments, you hear laughter from the next room. A woman is scolding her son for spilling olive oil, and her voice melts quickly into amusement. From somewhere above, the faint rhythm of a lute trickles down through the floorboards. It is not elegant music, but something cheerful, played by tired hands that refuse to surrender to exhaustion. Here's something that might make you smile. Some poorer Romans hung tiny bronze wind chimes in their doorways, shaped like animals or little gods. They believed the sound kept away envy and sickness. When the evening breeze stirred, those bells would tinkle softly through the streets, like fragments of lullabies floating from one life to another. Scholars remain divided over how much comfort these city dwellers truly found in such small rituals. Some call it superstition born of hardship, others see it as evidence of resilience, a way to claim beauty within chaos. Perhaps both are true. Even the humblest homes carried an understanding of peace that grandeur sometimes forgot. The floor beneath your feet creaks slightly. A clay lamp flickers beside a clay bowl of lentils. The room glows in shades of amber and shadow. A couple sits by the window, their heads close together as they share bread dipped in vinegar and herbs. You can hear the sound of water dripping from a cracked pipe outside. It feels like a song, slow and unhurried. According to surviving manuscripts, most city dwellers rented their spaces by the month. Some lived above taverns, others above shops that sold fish, perfume, or tools. Privacy was rare, but community was constant. People greeted each other from balconies, shared gossip through open shutters, and sang to drown out the sounds of argument or rain. Hidden among the calm of their lives was a curious ritual. In the evenings, some families sprinkled a pinch of salt on the doorstep while whispering a blessing for protection through the night. Salt was precious, a gift from the gods, and its sparkle in lamplight carried both comfort and reverence. You imagine the faint crunch beneath a sandal as someone steps across it, marking the end of one day and the quiet start of another. No one truly knows if these families ever felt safe. The buildings were fragile, the fires frequent, yet each night they lit their lamps, fed their children, and watched the stars through narrow windows. The courage in that small routine is something history often forgets to honor. You climb a narrow stairway to the roof. The tiles are warm beneath your feet, holding the last of the sun's heat. From here, you can see hundreds of lamps flickering in every direction, a constellation of human lives spread across the city. The air smells of charcoal and bread. Someone nearby hums an old song, soft and half asleep. It seems the Romans truly believed that community was its own kind of fortress. No marble, no gold, no army could protect them better than neighbors who remembered their names. The laughter, the shared bread, the gentle noise of life layered through the streets, all of it built an invisible strength that even time has not fully erased. You sit on the edge of the roof, the city stretching below you like a living tapestry. The stars are faint, blurred by smoke, but still there, patient and steady. You breathe in and let the sounds of Rome's night sink into you. The murmur of voices, the sigh of wind through broken shutters, the quiet promise of another dawn. History quietly keeps a note of how the humblest homes endured the longest. When palaces fell, these walls still stood, patched and repainted, their laughter echoing into new generations. You can almost hear it now, that same laughter carried upward through centuries, still alive in the warm hush of night. You rise before dawn again, following the faintest whisper of water. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and crushed leaves. Somewhere nearby, a fountain murmurs softly, and the sound draws you toward a high-walled courtyard tucked behind rows of sleeping houses. You step inside, and the world changes. The space opens around you in stillness. Laurel trees bow gently over stone paths, their leaves trembling with dew. The moon, low and pale, reflects in a pool so still it seems solid. Lamps shaped like tiny birds flicker in the corners, painting soft halos of light across the marble. Gardens like this were the Romans' favorite kind of quiet. Archaeological findings reveal that nearly every villa, even modest ones, included a small patch of green devoted to peace. They called it the hortus, the garden that belonged as much to the spirit as to the body. You walk slowly along a line of hedges, brushing your fingers across leaves that smell faintly of citrus. Small statues peek out from the shadows, half hidden by ivy. A nymph leaning toward a jug, a faun caught mid-dance, a child offering a bird to the sky. Each figure seems to hold its breath. A tender fragment of their world drifts to us through time. Some Romans placed little bowls of milk and honey at the roots of certain trees, believing the garden spirits would drink and bless the plants in return. The offerings would be gone by morning, perhaps taken by animals, but the people felt reassured. Even the smallest kindnesses carried meaning when the world was vast and uncertain. The evidence is open to interpretation when it comes to the purpose of these gardens. Some historians call them escapes from politics. Others see them as symbols of control, where nature was carefully shaped by human hands. Maybe both views are true. What matters is the peace they offered, the illusion of eternity within stone walls. The sound of the fountain deepens as you approach it. A marble dolphin spits a thin stream of water into the air, and the ripples catch the dim light like liquid glass. You kneel beside it, trailing your hand through the coolness. For a moment, the world feels suspended, neither ancient nor modern, just timeless. Ancient inscriptions confirm that Roman gardens were often designed according to the movements of light. Builders placed fountains where dawn would strike them first, and trees where the shade would be longest in summer. The result was a living clock that measured time through warmth and colour. You can almost sense the calculation beneath the calm. Here's something that might make you smile. Wealthy Romans trained certain plants to bloom at specific festivals. Gardeners timed their watering by lunar phases, believing that the moon coaxed petals to open more gently. Some even sang to their flowers at dusk, soft tunes meant to persuade beauty itself to linger a little longer. Perhaps that habit was superstition, or perhaps it was faith in the world's ability to listen. No one truly knows if the Romans found their deepest peace here, or if they used these spaces merely to display wealth. Yet the feeling remains unchanged. Even now, as you breathe the faint perfume of rosemary and soil, the quiet feels sacred. A nightingale sings somewhere above you. Its song trembles through the stillness like silver thread. You sit on a low bench carved with dolphins, and let the sound wash over you. The air has cooled, and your breath fogs faintly in the pale light. History quietly tells us that gardens were also places of conversation and confession. Friends met here to share secrets, lovers to trade letters, and philosophers to argue in whispers about virtue and fate. The rustle of leaves made a perfect curtain for private words. In the garden, truth could stretch its limbs without fear. You glance up at the sky. The stars begin to fade, replaced by a faint blush of dawn. The fountain sighs as if exhaling after a long night. Somewhere behind you, a servant opens a gate, and the first bird flutters down to the pool for a drink. You stand and take one last look around. The still water, the sleeping statues, the first light touching the roses. It all feels like a held breath, waiting to be released. You realize that in this ancient city of noise and ambition, silence itself was a kind of luxury. As you step back into the street, the garden's calm follows you. The scent of herbs clings to your skin, and for a moment, the whole city seems to breathe more softly. You walk on, knowing that somewhere behind those walls, the nightingale is still singing, and the garden still dreams. By the time you reach the river again, evening has returned. The sky is brushed with violet, and the first lanterns glow along the Tiber's edge. The sound of soft chatter rises from the taverns nearby. Somewhere, a musician tunes his lyre, testing notes that shimmer in the cooling air. Rome, once busy and bright, slips into its gentler rhythm. Contemporary accounts describe how Romans rarely dined or drank alone. Wine was not simply a beverage, but a ritual, a shared promise of friendship. The city's countless taverns filled every evening with laughter and debate, each cup a small rebellion against the weariness of the day. The drink itself was very different from what you know. It was often thick, sweetened with honey, and mixed with water or herbs. To drink it undiluted was considered barbaric. Here's something that might make you smile. Archaeologists have discovered tiny shards of glass cups, etched with personal inscriptions, gifts exchanged between friends. One reads, "Drink and live." Another, "Forget sorrow." There is tenderness in that. Each phrase feels like a quiet wish sent across the centuries. Experts find themselves uncertain about how much wine people truly consumed. Some ancient sources describe citizens staggering through the streets after feasts, while others insist moderation was the rule. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Wine was celebration, medicine, and prayer all at once, a way to draw light into the body. You follow a narrow street to a small tavern whose door stands open to the night. Inside, the air is warm and full of the smell of baked cheese, olives, and grape must. The walls are painted in faded red, decorated with quick sketches of Bacchus, the god of revelry, laughing as he holds a cup aloft. A man behind the counter greets you and pours a measure of pale wine into a clay cup. You take it, the rim rough against your lips, and sip slowly. It tastes faintly of pine resin, earthy and familiar. Around you, people talk quietly. Two older men play dice, teasing each other over lost coins. A young woman recites a few lines of verse, her voice barely above a whisper. According to the writings of Pliny the Elder, certain wines were aged with seawater, a practice believed to purify them and add strength. Others were flavored with myrrh, rose petals, or even pepper. Every province of the empire had its own favorite recipe, and travelers brought back new tastes from every border. The result was an endless variety of aromas, each one telling a story of land, trade, and experiment. Among the stranger customs of the time, one stands out. During particularly fine banquets, hosts would sometimes float small cups of wine in shallow pools, inviting guests to catch them as they drifted past. The idea was that fortune guided which cup one received. Some believed the gods chose whose night would be joyful, whose memory would fade. No one truly knows whether those games were taken seriously or played just for laughter. Yet even now, as you picture the rippling water reflecting candlelight, the image feels almost holy. The Romans knew how to give weight to pleasure, how to make every act of joy a kind of offering. You sit quietly, watching the flame of a nearby lamp dance across the cups on the table. The murmur of voices blends with the clinking of clay. Someone sings a slow tune about harvest and return, his voice low and steady. The song is old, maybe older than the empire itself. Outside, the night deepens. The air cools, carrying the smell of river reeds. You step out of the tavern, the warmth of the wine softening your thoughts. Across the water, the torches on the bridge shimmer, their reflections stretching like threads of gold. History quietly reminds us that these simple evenings, shared bread, shared laughter, a single cup passed between friends, were as vital to the empire's heart as its battles or monuments. For all its grandeur, Rome thrived on moments like this, where humanity itself felt enough. You pause by the riverbank, watching the current carry bits of light downstream. Somewhere, a flute begins to play again, its melody rising gently above the sound of water. You close your eyes and let the music follow the flow of the Tiber, winding slowly toward the sea, carrying the taste of wine and warmth into the dark. The heat of the day fades, leaving behind a pleasant hush. You follow the faint scent of myrrh and steam to a familiar place, though this one is quieter than the great public baths. It sits tucked behind a portico, its entrance shaded by cypress trees. Inside, voices drift through the vapor, low and thoughtful. These are the philosophers of the bathhouse, men and women who come not just to cleanse their bodies, but their minds. Ancient writers loved to remind their readers that baths were where Rome truly thought. Beneath the archways, arguments about virtue and fate mingled with the scent of oil and hot stone. Politicians, poets, and slaves might share the same pool, the same warmth, and perhaps the same longing to understand the world. The marble glowed in the light of 100 lamps, and the echoes of conversation rose to the ceiling like smoke. Here's something both delightful and odd. Some bathers brought pet birds to these gatherings, believing their chirping voices made the mind sharper. Others carried small ivory boxes filled with herbs to sniff between debates. The combination of steam, perfume, and philosophy must have felt intoxicating, a kind of luxury for the spirit. Scholars continue to weigh the evidence for how open these discussions truly were. Some say the baths encouraged equality, while others argue that rank still lingered, invisible but felt. Yet for a few hours, everyone seemed to belong to the same rhythm of thought and rest. Steam blurred differences, and ideas flowed as freely as the water itself. You walk deeper inside. The sound of water dripping from the ceiling blends with quiet laughter. Two men are leaning against a marble bench, arguing gently about the nature of happiness. One insists that pleasure is fleeting, that true peace lies in restraint. The other, smiling, counters that joy itself is proof of the divine. Their words rise and fall like waves, soothing to hear, even if you do not follow the logic. Archaeological findings reveal that Roman baths often had reading rooms attached to them, stocked with scrolls of poetry and philosophy. Visitors would leave the pools and sit beneath painted ceilings, dripping onto the marble floor as they read aloud from Epicurus or Cicero. A servant might fan the lamps to keep them from dimming. The air, heavy with moisture, made every word sound softer, as though truth itself spoke in whispers. Hidden among the calm of their lives was a curious ritual. Before leaving the baths, many Romans paused to anoint themselves with perfumed oil, then scraped it away with a curved bronze tool called a strigil. They believed that in removing the oil, they also removed the heaviness of thought. To emerge cleansed was not just a matter of skin, but of spirit. You watch as one bather performs this motion slowly, eyes half closed, the gesture almost meditative. Experts admit the truth is hazy when it comes to what these nightly gatherings truly achieved. Some argue they spread ideas that later shaped moral philosophy. Others claim they were merely an excuse for gossip dressed as wisdom. Perhaps both are right. In the warmth and water, the boundary between truth and comfort melted. You sit near the edge of a pool, listening. The steam curls around you, tasting faintly of resin and citrus. Somewhere, a teacher recites lines about patience, his voice blending with the steady drip of water. The sound has no beginning or end. It simply exists, looping through the air like breath. In one corner, a young woman laughs softly as she quotes a line of poetry to her friend. The words are simple. Rest is the courage of those who dare to live. You let that settle in your mind. It feels as true now as it must have felt then. If you could read the walls, you'd find traces of this life etched into them. Small graffiti lines remain. A name, a boast, a heart scratched by a wet finger into plaster. Even here, where the mind sought calm, the human need to leave a mark persisted. Perhaps that is what peace meant to them. Not the absence of thought, but the gentle conversation between effort and surrender. The baths offered a space where one could think deeply, speak freely, and leave lighter than they arrived. You stand at last. The floor glistens underfoot, and the night air rushes in as you push open the heavy door. Outside, Rome hums softly, its streets cooled by darkness. You glance back once, seeing the glow of steam through the open doorway, and for a moment it looks like the city itself is exhaling. History may forget their arguments, but not the calm they built together in the warmth of water and lamplight. You breathe deeply and step back into the night, carrying that calm with you like invisible armor. The last of the evening sunlight filters through the city as you follow the faint sound of strings. You pass under an archway where ivy hangs thick and cool, and find a small gathering in a courtyard. A few people sit on low stools beside a fountain, each holding an instrument of polished wood and stretched gut. The soft hum of tuning fills the air like the prelude to a dream. From what survives on stone and scroll, we learn that music was woven into every hour of Roman life. Songs woke the soldiers, guided farmers in their fields, and lulled children to sleep at night. It wasn't just entertainment, it was rhythm given to existence, a kind of heartbeat that joined the empire together. The melodies were often simple, but deeply human, the kind that slip easily into memory. Hidden among the calm of their evenings was a curious habit. Some Romans played music during meals, not loudly, but softly, so that conversation and sound mingled like wine and water. A single flute or lyre accompanied the clinking of cups, turning ordinary dinners into moments of calm delight. In letters preserved from Pompeii, one guest described how the music made the bread taste sweeter. You can almost hear it now, that subtle weaving of laughter and notes beneath the glow of lamps. Researchers still puzzle over the exact tones of these instruments. The scales carved onto surviving tablets show patterns unlike modern music, suggesting that Roman melodies drifted in unfamiliar intervals, neither sad nor joyful but floating somewhere between. Maybe that's why their songs linger in imagination, like half-remembered dreams. You sit near the fountain as a woman plucks a few gentle notes from her lyre. The sound is clear and light, like water sliding over glass. A man beside her joins in on a reed flute, his breath steady and unhurried. The tune they create has no rush, no need to arrive anywhere. It circles gently, soothing, endless. It is believed throughout ancient writings that musicians were both respected and dismissed, admired for beauty yet excluded from the higher orders of power. Still, their art reached where law and force could not. A single melody could make an emperor pause, or a slave remember freedom for a heartbeat. Music was the one empire that needed no soldiers. Here's something both delightful and odd. Some Roman musicians coated their fingers in honey before playing, claiming it made their touch softer on the strings. Others perfumed their instruments so that sound carried fragrance through the air. Imagine that a note that smells faintly of roses or pine, fading as gently as it began. Scholars remain divided about how widely music filled daily life. Some argue it was constant, like birdsong in the air. Others believe it belonged mostly to the educated and the elite. Yet even the simplest flute carved from bone could transform silence into something sacred. You feel it now, sitting here, how a single melody seems to soften the stones themselves. The fountain beside you sings in its own rhythm, drops falling at uneven intervals, the perfect counterpoint to the flute. Someone hums quietly. Another taps a drum, with fingers slick with oil. The sound gathers around you, until the air itself feels alive, trembling between pulse and breath. According to fragments of poetry preserved from that age, people believed certain notes could heal. One rhythm eased fevers, another calmed grief. The poet Horace once claimed that a well-played lyre could soothe the anger of gods. Whether or not that was true hardly matters now. In this courtyard, Under the scent of olive wood and the silver of the moon, peace feels like something you can hear. The tune slows. The last note stretches into silence, thin and clear as a thread of light. No one claps. Instead, everyone exhales together, as if waking from a shared vision. The players smile, nodding to one another, their eyes half closed. You lean back against the stone wall, the coolness grounding you. The world feels suspended, balanced perfectly between sound and stillness. Perhaps that is what harmony truly meant to the Romans. Not perfection, but presence. The ability to rest within a moment without needing it to change. As you rise to leave, the musicians begin another melody, softer this time, almost a lullaby. The air hums around you, full of something both old and eternal. You walk out into the street with that tune still in your ears, the kind that follows you into dreams. The night air cools as you walk away from the music. Lanterns flicker in quiet doorways, and the cobblestones glimmer faintly beneath your feet. Somewhere ahead, a small bark of laughter echoes, followed by a high chirp that sounds suspiciously like words. You turn a corner and find yourself in a courtyard filled with cages, bowls, and the faint scent of hay. It is a place devoted to the Romans' beloved companions. Old poets loved to remind their readers that Rome was never only marble and power. It was also feathers, fur, and small feet padding through its corridors. Almost every household, from emperor to shopkeeper, kept pets. Cats prowled grain stores to keep rats in check, dogs guarded doorways, and caged birds sang from balconies above the noise of the streets. These creatures were family long before the word carried its modern softness. If rumor can be trusted, one strange custom went like this. Some wealthy matrons taught their parrots to recite verses of poetry or fragments of greetings. The birds would greet guests at banquets with cheerful Latin phrases. Pliny the Elder even wrote of a raven trained to call out "Hail Caesar" whenever it heard footsteps. You can almost hear it now, a flutter of wings and a voice that doesn't quite sound human. Archaeologists still puzzle over whether Romans truly cherished their pets as companions or regarded them as ornaments. The tombstones of animals suggest genuine affection. One epitaph, carved carefully in stone, reads, "To my little dove, who never left my side." Others are almost heartbreaking. "For my dog, who loved me as faithfully as any man." Perhaps love has always found its voice, no matter the language or the time. You kneel beside a boy feeding a small white dog. The animal's fur gleams in the lantern light. The boy grins and tells you it belongs to his family's bakery. Its name, he says, means lucky. In the morning it will trot alongside the bread cart, tail high, keeping watch over loaves and crumbs alike. Ancient inscriptions confirm that animals appeared everywhere in Roman art. Frescoes showed monkeys stealing fruit, doves nesting in fountains, and hounds chasing deer through golden forests. Even the great mosaics of the wealthy often featured pets beside their masters' feet. The image of a sleeping dog, head resting on paws, was thought to symbolize loyalty and peace. Here's something both delightful and odd. Wealthy citizens sometimes hosted small funerals for beloved pets, complete with garlands and incense. A parrot might be laid to rest in a tiny coffin of cedar wood. A cat might be buried beneath rose bushes. The idea was that the gods, too, would enjoy their company. It seems even in grandeur, Romans had room for tenderness. Modern historians cannot fully agree about whether such affection extended to working animals. Horses, donkeys, and oxen carried much of the empire's weight, yet few were honoured with the same care. Still, records mention drivers who whispered to their teams before sleep, and farmers who left grain offerings for their plough beasts. It was a hard world, but not without kindness. You walk through the courtyard as night deepens. The birds in their cages rustle softly, wings shifting. Somewhere, a cat lands lightly from a wall, tail curling like a question. You feel the soft rhythm of life still moving, gentle and patient, as if every creature here keeps the city breathing. It's easy to forget how close people once lived to animals. They were not hobbies or decorations, but daily presences, sources of warmth, laughter, and responsibility. Their small eyes saw empires come and go, and still they purred, chirped, barked, and waited for food. Perhaps that is what makes Rome feel so alive even now. Beneath the marble and the myths, its streets were full of beating hearts, both human and not. You imagine falling asleep to the coo of doves, the rustle of dogs settling by doorways, and the occasional squawk of a parrot announcing the hour. As you leave, the boy waves goodnight, his dog already curled beside the bread cart. The last sound you hear is the soft scrape of claws against stone, fading into the steady breathing of a city that never truly sleeps. The first faint shimmer of dawn creeps across the rooftops. The stars fade one by one, and the city stretches itself awake. You walk through streets still holding the night's cool breath, following the smell of ripe fruit and wood smoke. A thin mist curls around the paving stones, softening every sound. Rome, even at this hour, never truly sleeps. Ancient records show that the markets began before sunrise. Vendors arrived in the dark, leading donkeys heavy with baskets of figs, olives, and grain. The streets filled with quiet greetings, the thud of wooden carts, and the steady rhythm of footsteps. By the time the first pink light touched the sky, the air was alive with murmurs and motion. These early hours were the pulse of the city, the moment when work and hope began again. You pass beneath a stone arch and step into the open square. It feels both vast and intimate. Lamps still burn here, throwing halos of gold across rows of stalls. One woman arranges her vegetables with deliberate care, each fig placed like an offering. A butcher sharpens his knife against a whetstone, its scrape sharp and clean. The smell of baking bread drifts through everything, warm and thick. Here's a detail that might surprise you. Roman bakers marked each loaf with a unique stamp before it went to market. The symbols told who made it, which oven it came from, and sometimes even which festival it was baked for. Archaeologists have found some of these stamps still clear after 2,000 years, small circles of identity that refuse to fade. Experts remain divided over whether the markets were truly calm or chaotic. Some ancient writers described them as orderly, while others painted scenes of shouting, jostling, and laughter echoing off the marble walls. Perhaps it depended on the district. In the heart of the city, trade was constant and loud, but here, at dawn, everything still feels hushed, as though the world holds its breath before beginning again. You stop at a fruit stall where a young man is stacking pomegranates. The skin of the fruit glows like polished stone. He offers you one with a grin, and when you break it open, the seeds gleam like rubies in your palm. The taste is sharp and sweet, waking your tongue and your thoughts together. The vendor laughs softly and returns to his work. Nearby, a fishmonger arranges his catch on a bed of wet reeds. Silver scales shimmer faintly in the light. He hums a tune as he works, one of those wordless songs that seem older than language. Every movement has rhythm, even here, in labor. According to fragments of poetry preserved from that time, the Romans found poetry in daily motion. A poet once wrote that the city breathes through its cellars, meaning that the true soul of Rome wasn't in palaces or temples, but in the hands of those who bartered and built. Watching them now, it's easy to understand. Among the stranger customs of the age, one stands out. Some vendors sprinkled the ground before their stalls with wine as a morning offering to Mercury, the god of trade. They believed it would keep thieves away and invite fair customers. The scent of wine, mixed with the smell of olives and flour, turning business into a small ritual of gratitude. The truth is still uncertain when it comes to how much freedom these merchants truly enjoyed. Some owned their stalls, others rented them from wealthy patrons or temples. For many, profit meant survival. Yet, even in hardship, the marketplace pulsed with resilience. You can feel it in the way voices rise and fall, in the calm confidence of people who know their craft. You wander through the maze of stalls. The light grows stronger now, shifting from gold to pale blue. Somewhere, a cart rattles over the stones. A mule snorts, and a woman calls out the price of her honey cakes. A child runs past with a basket of bread, laughing as pigeons scatter before him. The air tastes of salt, smoke, and sweetness all at once. It's written quietly between their stories that the Romans cherished these morning hours. The market was more than trade. It was connection. Neighbors met, news spread, plans were made. The empire itself seemed to breathe through these small exchanges. You pause to watch a potter set out his wares. His hands are steady, his eyes half closed, as if shaping clay and arranging it are the same act of prayer. The pots gleam in the growing light, each one a small testament to patience. Around you, the hum of voices swells into harmony. Maybe that is what Rome understood better than most, that peace isn't silence, but balance. The markets at dawn are living proof. They are noisy, fragrant, full of movement, yet somehow gentle, like the first heartbeat after sleep. As the sun finally rises over the rooftops, the lamps are snuffed out one by one. The mist fades, replaced by the color of day. You take one last breath of the morning air and taste the promise of bread, fruit, and life renewing itself in every corner of the waking city. The sun climbs higher, and the streets shimmer with heat. You wander toward a cluster of stalls draped with cloth, where rolls of fabric flutter like colourful sails. The faint fragrance of lanolin and dye hangs in the air. Here, Rome dresses itself. The sound of traders calling out prices rises softly above the rustle of linen and the scrape of scissors. Ancient letters quietly mention that Roman clothing spoke louder than any title. The drape of a tunic, the shade of a cloak, the shimmer of jewellery, all of it announced who you were long before you spoke. White wool marked the citizen, rough brown cloth the worker, and deep crimson belonged to emperors alone. Dyes were expensive, some drawn from crushed shells found in distant waters. Every thread carried the geography of the empire. You brush your fingers over a roll of fabric. It feels light, almost like water. The vendor smiles, explaining that it comes from Egypt, woven from flax that shimmered in the desert wind. Next to it lies a darker cloth from Britain, thick and coarse, meant for colder nights. You can almost imagine the hands that spun it, the weavers humming as they worked by lamplight. A tender custom from that world still lingers. Wealthy families often scented their clothes with oils of rose or cedar before wearing them. Servants stored garments in wooden chests filled with herbs and pine needles, so that every movement left a trace of fragrance behind. Even in the crowd, a passerby could recognize a noblewoman by scent alone. Experts remain divided over how strictly Romans followed the laws of fashion. Some records insist on rigid dress codes, while others describe a society full of small rebellions, citizens who dared to wear brighter colors, soldiers who embroidered secret messages into their cloaks, slaves who mimicked their masters' styles on festival days. In the end, the city's vanity and creativity found a way to coexist. You pause beside a tailor cutting fabric. The snip of his blade is rhythmic, steady, almost musical. Nearby, a young woman holds up a tunic to the light. The cloth ripples like water, catching the sunlight. She turns to her friend, laughing softly as she tries to imagine how it will fall over her shoulders. It's a small, perfect scene. A glimpse of vanity turned gentle, the everyday beauty that history often overlooks. According to surviving frescoes, fashion extended even to footwear. Sandals were tied with ribbons or thin chains, sometimes inlaid with bits of coloured glass. On colder nights, people wore soft boots lined with fur or wool. One poet joked that you could tell a lover's mood by the sound of her sandals in the hall, the slow steps of joy, the quick rhythm of irritation. Here's something both curious and sweet. Archaeologists once uncovered a tiny bronze pin, shaped like a heart, found near the doorway of an old Roman house. It may have fallen from a hairpiece or fastener, but its design suggests it was meant as a token of affection. Perhaps it was a gift from one lover to another, or a lucky charm dropped by accident. Its smallness is what makes it timeless. Modern historians cannot fully agree about how clothing influenced identity. Was it truly a sign of virtue and discipline, or just vanity draped in tradition? Perhaps both ideas walk together through these streets. After all, the toga could hide pride or humility depending on who wore it. A breeze lifts the edge of a fabric roll, and you catch the scent of dye, sharp, earthy, and alive. Around you, voices overlap in a steady hum. A merchant gestures animatedly, showing off imported silk from the east, so fine it slips through his fingers like smoke. People gather to touch it, eyes bright with wonder. You look around and see how every colour glows under the sun. Saffron, sky blue, wine red, the soft white of linen drying on lines above the street. The entire city seems to breathe in hue and texture. Clothing here is more than necessity. It is memory, aspiration, and self all stitched together. The tailor finishes his work and folds the last piece carefully. He wipes sweat from his brow, then smiles at the fabric as though it's something sacred. Maybe, to him, it is. A new garment is a beginning, a quiet promise to the body that wears it. You leave the market, and the air cools slightly as you step into shadow. The sound of fabric still rustles in your ears, the echo of scissors and laughter fading behind you. Rome, even in its vanity, seems to understand that beauty and peace can come from the same thread. The afternoon sun softens into amber as you walk toward the quieter edge of the city. The noise of trade fades behind you, replaced by the low hum of cicadas. You pass through a narrow gate flanked by laurel trees and find yourself in a world hidden within the walls. It is a courtyard, silent and dappled with light, where even time seems to move more gently. It is believed throughout ancient writings that the Romans cherished such spaces. They built them behind houses and temples, hidden from the dust and bustle of the streets. These courtyards were sanctuaries of calm, part garden, part reflection. The word peristylium described a courtyard surrounded by graceful columns, where vines climbed and fountains murmured quietly. Here, the empire's heart learned to rest. You step beneath the shade of a fig tree. The air feels cooler, touched with the scent of water and mint. A small pool ripples at the center, its surface scattered with fallen petals. The sound of the fountain is steady, soft enough to draw thought inward. A pair of doves drink from the edge, unafraid. The moment holds itself perfectly still. Hidden among the calm of their lives was a curious ritual. Romans believed that water in motion carried good fortune, so they kept fountains running even at night. Some households placed small bronze fish in the basins, believing their glint would attract friendly spirits. Others lined the edges with tiny oil lamps, turning the courtyard into a field of stars when evening came. You can almost see that glow now, golden and tender. Researchers continue to disagree about how private these courtyards truly were. Some say they were quiet refuges, meant only for family. Others argue that they served as stages for subtle display, where hosts showed their taste through rare plants or imported marble. Maybe both ideas are true. Even solitude can carry a hint of pride. You move slowly along the edge of the pool. The reflection of the sky wavers with your steps. A breeze stirs the vines, releasing a faint perfume of jasmine. Somewhere a bird calls once, then falls silent again. The air is so still you can hear your heartbeat echo in your ears. Ancient inscriptions confirm that courtyards often included statues of gods associated with serenity, Venus for harmony, Apollo for light, or small local spirits of home. Offerings of honey, figs, or olive oil were placed before them at dusk. These gestures were simple, but they bridged the human and the divine with quiet grace. Here's something that might make you smile. Some Romans trained small turtles to live in the pools, treating them as living ornaments. The slow movement of their shells across the water was thought to symbolize patience and wisdom. There's something endearing about that, isn't there? Even an empire obsessed with progress could find beauty in slowness. Archaeologists have uncovered painted walls from these inner courtyards, scenes of gardens and birds so vivid they almost seem to breathe. Some scholars think these frescoes were meant to blur the line between reality and imagination, to make the small space feel infinite. The idea feels timeless, a reminder that peace is not found in size, but in stillness. You sit on a stone bench and close your eyes for a moment. The cool air brushes your skin like silk. The murmur of the fountain wraps around you, slow and hypnotic. For a few breaths, you could be anyone, from any century, sitting in this same pocket of calm. It seems the Romans understood that silence was not emptiness, but a form of music. They listened to it the way others might listen to a hymn. In these courtyards, even the smallest sound, a drop of water, a leaf brushing stone, felt sacred. The sun lowers further, filling the space with gold. You watch the light crawl along the columns until it reaches the pool and turns the surface into fire. The doves flutter away, leaving ripples that fade into perfect smoothness. Maybe that was the real purpose of such courtyards, to remind people that the world could still be gentle. Even in an empire of armies and monuments, there were corners where nothing needed to happen. The Romans built power, yes, but they also built pause. As you stand to leave, the air shifts again. The fountain whispers behind you, steady as breath. You glance back one last time and see your reflection shimmering beside the marble statues. For a moment, it seems the past looks back. Then a petal falls into the pool, and both images dissolve together. The road stretches ahead, pale and endless, winding through fields of olive trees that shimmer under the late afternoon sun. The air smells of dust and time. You hear the creak of a cart somewhere behind you, its wooden wheels keeping time with your heartbeat. The empire was made of roads like this, straight, patient, and built to last longer than their makers ever could. People of that age believed the roads were gifts from the gods. Each milestone was placed with precision, each stone fitted so tightly that rainwater could not find a crack. Even now, centuries later, fragments of those stones still lie buried beneath grass and wildflowers, their surfaces smoothed by the souls of countless travelers. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel the rhythm of footsteps continuing forever. Travel in Rome was slower, but rarely lonely. Inns dotted the highways, simple shelters where merchants, soldiers, and pilgrims could rest. Their names were painted on wooden signs: the Golden Stag, the Happy Fig, the Sailor's Rest. Most were humble, but all promised the same comfort: bread, wine, and a roof against the night. It's almost amusing to picture how they used to announce arrivals. Instead of knocking, travellers clapped their hands or snapped their fingers to summon a host. The sound carried through courtyards filled with smoke and laughter. Servants hurried to bring warm water for washing, and dogs barked half-hearted greetings before curling back into sleep. No one can quite agree what really happened inside these inns after sunset. Some ancient writers claimed they were noisy dens full of gossip, while others insisted they were havens of quiet stories shared between strangers. Perhaps each was both a mix of comfort and chaos that made the long road feel alive. You imagine stepping through one of those doors now. The floor is packed earth, cool beneath your sandals. A fire crackles in a low stone hearth. A pot of lentils simmers beside it, filling the air with the scent of garlic and oil. The innkeeper, a woman with tired eyes and quick hands, offers you a seat on a bench worn smooth by 1,000 travellers before you. From what survives in travellers' notes, we know that journeys shaped Roman hearts as much as wars did. Couriers rode from Britain to Syria, carrying letters sealed with wax. Merchants crossed mountains to trade glass and ivory. Families moved to new colonies, chasing work and fortune. The roads were arteries, carrying the empire's pulse from one end of the world to the other. Some stories claim a few Romans brought small charms from home when they travelled: tiny figurines of household gods, kept in pouches for luck. Before sleeping, they would place them near their heads, whispering prayers for safety. You can almost see one now, flickering in firelight beside a traveller's bed, a silent promise that home still exists somewhere behind him. Archaeologists have found messages scratched into the plaster walls of these inns. Names, jokes, confessions. One reads, "I slept well here. May all who enter find the same." Another, more mischievous, says, "Beware the watered wine. The voices that left those marks are gone, but their humour remains bright, like candles that never fully burn out." Maybe the most remarkable thing about the Roman road was not its scale, but its intimacy. Each traveller who walked it left something behind: a footprint, a laugh, a story. Each mile held the weight of human persistence. The empire may have stretched for thousands of miles, but every journey was personal. One person's quiet conversation with the horizon. Outside the inn, the light fades. The fields turn silver under the rising moon. A traveller finishes his meal, thanks the host, and steps into the cool air. He looks down the long road ahead, knowing it will take him weeks to reach the next city. But somehow, that thought feels comforting. The rhythm of distance is its own kind of peace. You follow him with your eyes until he becomes a small shape swallowed by twilight. The sound of his footsteps merges with the rustle of wind in the olive branches. In this moment, you understand how the roads of Rome were more than stone. They were stories laid end to end, leading home in every direction. You sit quietly for a while, listening to the whisper of wheels and hoofbeats fading into the night. Somewhere in the dark, an innkeeper snuffs out a lamp, and another begins to glow in the next town. The journey never really ends. It only changes its pace. Night settles softly over the harbour. The air smells of salt, wet rope, and tar. You walk along the wooden planks of the pier, each creak beneath your feet blending with the rhythm of waves brushing against the hulls of ships. The Mediterranean stretches before you like a sheet of dark glass, dotted with lanterns swaying from masts. Somewhere, a sailor hums an old tune to keep time with his work. From what remains in records and carvings, it is clear that Rome lived as much by sea as by land. Its ships carried grain from Egypt, wine from Greece, and stories from everywhere the wind would take them. The empire's breath rose and fell with the tides. To sail those waters was to feel both power and humility in equal measure. You stand beside a cargo ship ready to depart. Men move quietly, loading amphorae of oil and baskets of figs. Their torches cast thin gold lines across the water. The captain checks the knots, his voice low but calm. In a few moments, the ropes will be untied, and the vessel will slip from the dock like a thought disappearing into darkness. There was, of course, one habit, both strange and endearing. Before each voyage, sailors tossed bits of bread into the sea as an offering to Neptune. If the bread floated, they believed the journey would be safe. If it sank, someone would whisper a quick prayer and try again until luck seemed satisfied. You can almost hear the plop of the bread hitting the surface and the quiet laughter that followed. Scholars still chase the question of how well those sailors understood the dangers they faced. Some describe them as fearless, others as deeply superstitious. Perhaps both are true. Even the bravest man can tremble before a storm he cannot see. The Mediterranean was generous, but unpredictable. One day, it carried gold. The next, it swallowed entire fleets without warning. You walk farther down the pier where smaller boats rock gently, tied with thick ropes. A fisherman sits cross-legged, mending a net. His hands move slowly, the same motion repeated endlessly. He looks up once, nods, then returns to his work. You hear the faint slap of water against wood, the sigh of wind filling a half-raised sail. Ancient accounts describe how travel by sea was an act of faith. Navigators read the stars and the colour of the water to guide their way. Sailors whispered to dolphins, believing they brought good omens. On calm nights, phosphorescent waves glowed under the hulls, turning the sea into liquid starlight. Those who saw it said it was like drifting across the Milky Way itself. It's almost amusing to imagine how these men slept aboard their ships. They lay wrapped in cloaks, lulled by the endless rocking, dreaming of harbours they might never see again. Some sang quietly before sleeping, songs to their wives or to the gods, unsure who listened more faithfully. Others simply stared upward, watching constellations slide past like slow travellers. Archaeological findings reveal that Roman sailors often carved their names and home ports into the sides of piers. They wanted proof that they had stood there, that they had existed between departure and return. A few of those names still survive, chipped but legible, the handwriting of men who trusted the sea with everything they owned. Perhaps the most touching sight tonight is not the ships themselves, but the quiet along the shore. Families stand together, watching their loved ones vanish into the horizon. The glow of torches reflects in the water, breaking into fragments with every ripple. You can almost hear the mix of pride and fear in the air, that tender ache of farewell that never changes, no matter the century. The captain calls out. Ropes fall into the water with a soft splash. The ship begins to move, slow and deliberate. The sail catches a breath of wind and unfurls, white against the dark. The creak of the mast sounds almost human, like a long sigh. The vessel glides forward until its lantern becomes just one more star on the sea. For a moment, you stay at the edge of the pier, watching the wake spread outward in smooth, pale curves. The world feels wider than ever, yet strangely peaceful. You realize that every journey is a kind of prayer, every departure a promise to return. Behind you, the harbour quiets again. The fisherman sets his net aside and leans against his boat, eyes half closed. The moonlight turns the ropes silver, the water black as ink. Somewhere beyond the horizon, ships whisper to the wind, and the wind carries those whispers home. You take a slow breath, tasting salt on your lips. The sea hums softly at your feet, steady and eternal. For the Romans, this sound was the heartbeat of the world, and tonight it feels like yours too. The light shifts again, softer now, and the scent of crushed herbs rides the breeze. You leave the coast behind and follow a winding path uphill toward a cluster of terraced farms. The soil is dark and rich, the air alive with the hum of insects. Farmers move slowly through the fields, their bodies outlined by the low sun. The rhythm of their movements is steady, unhurried, like a heartbeat that never falters. From what remains in old writings, we know that the Roman countryside was not only the empire's pantry but also its peace. The city might have been marble and ambition, but here was the soul that kept it alive. Every grain, olive, and grape carried a story of patience. The Romans saw cultivation as divine partnership, a quiet dialogue between human effort and the generosity of the earth. You pause by a vineyard. Vines climb in perfect rows, their leaves whispering in the wind. A man stands among them, hands stained purple from pressing grapes. He nods to you, smiling with a kind of tired pride. Beside him, clay jars rest in the shade, half buried to keep the wine cool. The smell of fermentation is sharp but comforting, the scent of work turning slowly into joy. It's almost amusing to picture how the harvest once became a festival. Families sang as they gathered grapes, their songs carrying down the hills. Children stomped barefoot in wooden vats while elders told jokes and poured wine from last year's barrels. What began as labour ended in laughter, the kind that rings clear against the walls of time. No one can say for certain whether these celebrations were more sacred or social. Some scholars insist the rituals honoured Bacchus, the god of revelry, while others think they simply marked relief after months of toil. Perhaps it didn't matter. Every cheer and song was its own form of gratitude, a hymn sung not to gods but to life itself. A farmer waves you over and hands you a fig just picked from the tree. Its skin is warm, its sweetness earthy and deep. You bite into it slowly. The taste feels older than language, as though the fruit remembers every hand that ever planted a seed. According to accounts carved into stone tablets, farmers offered the first fruits of the harvest to the household spirits, pouring drops of wine onto the ground before tasting it themselves. The gesture was simple and wordless, a way to acknowledge that survival was a shared act. In those small libations lived both faith and humility. Some stories claim that in the quiet of dusk, farmers would speak to their fields as if to family. They asked for forgiveness when the soil turned dry, promised care when the rains returned. Whether those words were prayers or habit, no one can tell. But the idea feels tender, a reminder that the line between belief and love is often thin. The sun dips behind the hills, leaving the fields bathed in gold. Workers gather their tools, their silhouettes moving against the fading light. You hear the distant splash of water in an irrigation channel, the rustle of wheat in the evening breeze. Everything seems to slow, folding into calm. It seems the Romans understood that rest was as essential to growth as labor. They ended each day by sitting together in the open air, watching the horizon until the last color faded. Some shared stories, others simply listened to the night rise around them. In that stillness, the empire was no longer an idea of conquest, but of endurance. You sit beside an olive tree. Its bark twists like an ancient face, weathered yet alive. The wind moves through its branches, carrying the faint scent of salt from the distant sea. The stars appear one by one, faint pinpricks of light over the dark fields. Maybe this is what balance looked like: work and rest, faith and laughter, all stitched together in the rhythm of the land. The Romans built their monuments in stone, but their true legacy might be the patience that still lives in the soil. You close your eyes for a moment. The sounds of harvest linger in your ears. The murmur of voices, the creak of baskets, the soft thud of fruit dropping into clay jars. The night deepens, and the fields breathe quietly around you, still faithful to the memory of hands that once tended them. The afternoon heat shimmers across the stones of the forum, where every voice seems to echo and fade into the bright air. The square is alive again. Merchants shouting prices, senators arguing in measured tones, and street performers weaving through the crowd. You move slowly, taking in the rhythm of this great heart of the empire. Every surviving tablet seems to agree that the Forum was more than a marketplace. It was the mind of Rome itself, the place where power and rumor, faith and curiosity met under the same open sky. From sunrise to dusk, the sound of sandals on marble never ceased. People came to argue, to watch, or simply to belong. A priest walks past carrying a tray of incense, the sweet smoke rising in delicate spirals. Nearby, a group of lawyers in white togas debate a property dispute, while scribes scratch notes on wax tablets. Even their arguments sound like music, a chorus of intellect and ego. Somewhere between all that ceremony, something quietly human lingers. There's a man with a small cage of songbirds offering them for good luck. Another sells perfume distilled from crushed petals. A woman sits by a pillar with a basket of figs, smiling at passers-by. It's easy to forget, amid the grandeur, how much tenderness the city still held. Archaeologists still uncover hints that public speeches were as much theatre as politics. Some orators rehearsed in front of mirrors, practicing gestures and pauses, their voices carried across the plaza, amplified by the stone walls and the murmur of the crowd. It's said that even those who disagreed with the message often stayed just to hear the cadence of the words. There was a custom, both practical and poetic, of dropping small coins into fountains near the Forum. People believed that running water carried wishes upward toward the gods. The coins caught sunlight as they sank, turning the pools into glittering constellations. Perhaps hope itself looked like that, sparkling quietly beneath the surface. No one has ever pinned down the full truth of what it felt like to live among such noise and beauty. Some ancient accounts call it exhausting, others call it exhilarating. The truth may lie somewhere between a balance of awe and fatigue, of grandeur and intimacy. You walk beneath the shadow of a basilica. The floor is cool beneath your sandals. Columns rise like frozen trees, holding up a ceiling painted with fading gold. Someone nearby prays softly. Another leans against the wall to rest. For a city so loud, moments of stillness always found a way to survive. It's almost endearing to imagine how people gossiped even here, in the shadow of power. A passing servant whispers about a senator's scandal, while a boy tries to mimic the gestures of a famous speaker. History often forgets these tiny acts of imitation, but they are what make the scene feel alive. Old inscriptions murmur the same truth again and again. that Rome's strength was not only its armies, but its ability to gather and talk, to build worlds out of words. The Forum was a mirror of the empire, chaotic, eloquent, and endlessly curious. As the light begins to fade, the crowd thins. Merchants pack their goods, lawyers roll up their scrolls, and even the pigeons seem to rest. The marble gleams with a last wash of sunlight, turning gold before falling into shadow. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of smoke and stone. You find a quiet corner and sit on the steps, watching as the lamps are lit one by one. The noise fades into murmurs, then into silence. For the first time all day, the city seems to sigh. The stones around you still hold the warmth of the sun, and you rest your hands on them, feeling the pulse of something larger than memory. Maybe that is what Rome truly was. Not a collection of buildings or laws, but a voice that never stopped speaking. Even now, when you listen closely, you can still hear it. 1,000 years of footsteps, laughter, and argument folded into a single breath of evening air. The lamps flicker, the wind carries a final wisp of incense, and the Forum sleeps again, dreaming of voices that will never completely fade. Evening deepens as you leave the city centre. The marble fades to shadow, and you follow the scent of smoke and oil lamps toward the outskirts. The streets grow quieter here, lined with simple homes and workshops. In the distance, the steady rhythm of hammering drifts through the warm air. You follow that sound until you find its source, a forge, glowing red in the darkness. From what the old chroniclers recorded, the blacksmiths of Rome were more than craftsmen. They were the quiet makers of the empire's skeleton. Every sword, plough, chisel, and lock passed through their hands. Fire was their language, and the anvil their heartbeat. You step closer, feeling the pulse of heat brush your skin. The smith works bare-armed, sweat shining under the flicker of his forge. Sparks rise like golden insects, disappearing into the air. Each strike of the hammer rings clear and rhythmic. He shapes the glowing metal with patience, as if coaxing it into remembering its purpose. Hidden inside all that labour is a detail both simple and beautiful. Some forges kept small jars of sacred ash, taken from earlier fires. When a new apprentice began work, the master would sprinkle a pinch of that ash over the coals. It was said to give the flame memory, a reminder that even new beginnings are made from what came before. No one has ever fully agreed on how these smiths saw themselves. Some inscriptions call them humble servants, others praise them as artists. Perhaps they were both guardians of utility and creators of grace. The empire's beauty and strength often came from the same glowing metal. You watch the craftsman quench the blade in a trough of water. Steam curls upward, hissing softly. The smell of iron fills the air, sharp but comforting. In this moment, the noise of the city feels far away. The world shrinks to the glow of fire, the rhythm of work, and the calm that comes from repetition. Archaeologists still find blackened fragments of tools in old ruins, handles long gone but edges intact. Even rusted, they keep a kind of dignity, a testament to endurance. To hold one is to hold the ghost of purpose. It's easy to imagine that at night, when the forge cooled, the smith sat outside beneath the stars. His hands would still smell of smoke. Perhaps he looked at the constellations and wondered if the gods ever grew tired of creating too. The Romans built temples for Jupiter and Mars, but their quiet reverence for fire may have been their truest devotion. Fire forged their cities, cooked their meals, and guarded their homes. To tend a flame was an act of faith. Somewhere nearby, another hammer begins to ring, then another. The sounds overlap until the air hums with quiet music. Each strike is a conversation between metal and man, between will and heat. It feels endless, yet soothing, like a heartbeat that has always been there. It's almost poetic that the tools forged in these dim workshops would one day shape marble for palaces or dig trenches for aqueducts. The city above glittered because of hands like these, unseen yet indispensable. The smith sets the finished blade aside, its surface dark and still steaming. He wipes his brow and leans on the anvil, the exhaustion on his face softened by pride. He does not need applause. The glow of the forge is reward enough. You step away into the night. Behind you, the hammer begins again, slower now, each sound echoing down the empty streets. It fades until it becomes part of the city's breathing. The stars above shimmer faintly, reflected in puddles left by the day's labour. Somewhere, another fire flickers to life, another craft begins, and the quiet rhythm of creation continues. The empire sleeps, but its heartbeat never does. The night feels cooler as you wander beyond the workshops and follow the smell of fresh bread mixed with crushed herbs. A faint hum of voices floats through the darkness, and before long, you reach a small courtyard glowing with lamplight. Tables are scattered under grapevines, and people sit together eating, talking, and laughing softly. You have stumbled upon a Roman tavern at its quietest and most welcoming hour. Old inscriptions etched into plaster suggest that such places were the city's heartbeat after sunset. Soldiers, travelers, poets, and laborers all gathered here, shedding titles and burdens. The walls were painted with scenes of wine and waves, and the floors were worn smooth by countless footsteps. For a few coins, anyone could buy warmth, food, and the comfort of company. You sit near the edge, where the shadows of the vines sway across the table. A jug of wine rests beside a small loaf of bread and a dish of olives. The air smells of garlic and roasted chickpeas. Somewhere nearby, someone plucks a stringed instrument, letting the melody drift lazily through the night. Hidden among all this ease was a curious habit. Tavern keepers often wrote the day's menu in chalk on the wall, but instead of listing food, they used riddles. A line might read, "What swims in oil but dies in fire?" And the answer, of course, was fish. Patrons enjoyed the puzzle almost as much as the meal, laughing when someone guessed wrong. Perhaps that small playfulness was what made these places endure. No one can say with certainty whether they were seen as respectable or rough. Some historians describe them as dens of vice, others as sanctuaries of laughter. The truth likely depends on who was speaking and how much wine they had already drunk. You sip from the cup in front of you. The wine is tart, mixed with honey and a hint of pepper. It warms your chest and softens the world. Two men at a nearby table argue cheerfully about which god is more forgiving, Bacchus or Mercury. A woman interrupts, saying that neither cares so long as people keep buying wine. The room erupts in easy laughter. Archaeologists have found small clay tokens stamped with the images of grapes and amphorae. These were tavern coins, used instead of money, passed between regulars as promises for the next drink. Some tokens have even been found in graves, tucked beside the dead, perhaps to buy one final cup on the road to the underworld. There's something tender in that idea, that rest and joy belonged not just to life, but to eternity. It reminds you that the Romans, for all their seriousness, knew how to celebrate being alive. Their joy was simple, human, and utterly timeless. You watch as the tavern keeper carries a tray of steaming bowls to a nearby table. The dish smells of lentils and herbs. She pauses to refill someone's cup, and the firelight catches the gold thread in her hair. There is grace in her motion, the kind that comes from repetition rather than performance. The night deepens. Outside, the street grows quieter. Inside, conversation softens into murmurs. Someone begins to hum a slow tune about home, and others join in, their voices blending with the crackle of the fire. The melody rises and falls like breathing. It's easy to imagine how these gatherings outlasted the empires that built them. Long after marble crumbled, people still sat together under vines, still raised cups to friendship, still found comfort in food and laughter. Civilization may have changed, but the warmth of shared company never has. You lean back against the wooden bench and close your eyes. The music fades into the sound of the wind moving through the leaves above. Somewhere, a jug clinks gently against a cup. The scent of bread and oil lingers in the air, and for a moment, time feels motionless. Maybe that is the truest peace Rome ever knew, not conquest or glory, but the simple joy of being together, of ending a long day in laughter and candlelight. The tavern breathes softly around you, holding the world in perfect balance between wakefulness and dream. The dawn feels soft as silk when you reach the edge of a Roman bathhouse. The walls glow faintly in the first light, still holding the warmth of the night fires that heated the water. A gentle mist clings to the ground, curling around your ankles like breath. You step inside, and the air thickens with the scent of steam, herbs, and marble. The calm here feels ancient, shaped by ritual and routine rather than luxury. The stones themselves seem to remember that bathing was more than cleansing. It was a social rhythm, a pause between effort and conversation. The baths opened at sunrise and welcomed everyone: merchants, philosophers, soldiers, and children. Water was the one thing that united the empire, flowing through aqueducts and into lives so ordinary that its miracle was often forgotten. You walk past a row of stone basins, each one carved smooth by use. Drops of water slide down the walls in silver threads. Somewhere ahead, laughter echoes softly, joined by the splash of someone sinking into a warm pool. The sound carries like a sigh. In one corner, attendants crush herbs into oil. The The scent of thyme and lavender fills the air. They stir it into water that will later be poured over aching shoulders. Watching them, you realize that care was its own art here, practical, quiet, and kind. Even the smallest gesture carried its own calm intention. Everyday life, however, loved to surprise its makers. A group of children play with wooden boats in a shallow basin, while their mothers talk nearby. A senator, stripped of his toga, chats with a baker as if they were equals. The baths made everyone bare, and perhaps that was the point. For a few hours, rank melted like wax in the heat. Time has left only hints of what those moments truly felt like. Fragments of mosaic show swimmers mid-motion, their faces half lost to age, but still joyful. Inscriptions speak of good water, good company, and the small blessing of clean skin. The rest has vanished, carried away in steam. You wander farther in, where the pools deepen and the air turns warmer. Sunlight filters through high windows, scattering across the water in trembling light. The surface ripples where someone moves, then settles again into a mirror. The silence feels alive. It's easy to picture the scenes once hidden by these walls. Friends gossiping, lovers whispering under the hum of echoing voices, the old men arguing gently about the best temperature of the caldarium. Rome's philosophers might have debated the soul, but here they learned the art of stillness. A faint song drifts through the corridors, hummed by a woman carrying fresh towels. The tune is simple, repeating in soft waves. You catch only a few words. Something about patience, something about mourning. Her voice blends with the drip of water and the low rumble of heat beneath the floor. Look closely, and you can still see traces of this world etched into the stone. On one wall, graffiti in delicate script reads, "I came here weary and left at peace." Another carving simply shows two hands joined under a stream of water. The message is almost too simple to analyze. It says everything without needing words. There was, it seems, a small charm that bathers liked to leave behind. Smooth pebbles rubbed between their palms during bathing, then placed along the pool's edge before leaving. The gesture meant gratitude for the day's calm. Archaeologists have found piles of them, each no larger than a coin. The habit feels sweet, like a thank you whispered to the water itself. The air grows warmer as you move toward the largest room. Here, the ceiling rises into a dome painted with faint traces of stars. Torches flicker below, turning the surface of the pool into liquid bronze. People move slowly, unhurried, their voices reduced to murmurs. The water laps quietly against the marble sides, and the sound seems to erase every other noise. Perhaps this was why the Romans bathed so often. Not vanity, but relief. To step into water was to remember softness in a world of stone. The body floated, the mind loosened, and for a while, even time seemed to dissolve. You dip your fingers into the pool. The warmth spreads through your skin like memory. It feels endless, familiar, safe. The reflections on the ceiling shift and shimmer, painting your face in fragments of gold. Outside, the city is waking again. Carts rumble along the streets, vendors shout the day's wares, and yet within these walls, the sound is only a distant echo. The water continues its slow conversation with gravity, and you breathe with it, deeply and evenly. Maybe this was their greatest invention, not the aqueducts or the marble, but the ability to turn cleanliness into contemplation. In the act of bathing, they remembered what it meant to belong to the world, to let go of what clings too tightly. You rise and walk toward the exit, the warmth following you like a kind farewell. Behind you, the bath still hums softly, the air still fragrant with oil and quiet voices. Outside, morning light spills across the city's rooftops. The day begins again, patient and bright, as if the whole empire has just exhaled. The afternoon sun leans gently over the rooftops as you wander through a quieter district, where the air smells of parchment and dust. The noise of the marketplace fades behind you, replaced by the soft rustle of scrolls being unrolled and the faint scratch of quills. You have arrived at one of Rome's libraries, a place where words themselves were treated like sacred objects. If the walls could still whisper, they would tell you that this was where power turned into memory. The Romans gathered everything they could: Greek poetry, Egyptian medicine, Latin philosophy, and stored it in cool rooms built to outlast their own names. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, stacked with rolled papyrus sealed by wax and marked with red ink. The smell of the place was a mixture of ink, glue, and age. A librarian moves quietly between the shelves, her hands careful, her robe brushing against the floor. She lifts a scroll, checks its label, and places it back with the precision of someone performing a ritual. To read here was not merely to learn, but to enter a kind of stillness. Every word was a doorway, every silence between lines, a place to breathe. It's the sort of calm that makes even the smallest detail come alive. In the corner, a young boy polishes a bronze lamp so that the light reflects off the papyrus rolls. A scholar at a nearby desk mouths words as he reads, his lips moving with the rhythm of thought. Others take notes on wax tablets, erasing and rewriting endlessly, as if trying to catch meaning before it slips away. Long ago, someone took note of how the Romans believed knowledge carried a warmth of its own. Libraries were often built near the public baths, so that a person could cleanse both body and mind in one journey. They called it balance, though the word was softer then, more like harmony than discipline. Stranger still, these libraries often kept their own gardens. Olive trees shaded the courtyards, and fountains sang among statues of muses. It was said that reading under the sound of flowing water helped the mind absorb more gently. Perhaps it was true. You can imagine sitting beneath one of those trees now, tracing words in the dust while the leaves murmur above. The evidence disagrees with itself about who had access to such places. Some texts say only the wealthy were allowed to read freely, while others describe soldiers and merchants stopping by to copy a poem or letter. The truth, as always, seems to rest somewhere in between. Knowledge, like light, found its way through any crack it could. You move toward the main reading hall, where sunlight filters through thin sheets of mica set into the ceiling. The glow is pale and steady, turning the air golden. Scrolls lie open on tables of polished wood, each one a small world waiting to be unfolded. There's something touching in how fragile these treasures were. A single spark or careless hand could erase centuries of thought, and yet the Romans kept copying, teaching, sharing. They believed that ideas were as alive as people, and that death only came when no one remembered the words. Between solemn study, laughter sometimes broke the silence. Someone sneezed and startled a flock of birds nesting on the rafters. A student lost his place and groaned loudly, earning a glare from the elders. The life inside those walls was not cold or distant. It pulsed with the same warmth as the city outside, only slower. You pause by a desk where a poem lies half-translated. The lines speak of stars reflected in a bowl of water, of time folding into itself. The ink is still fresh, the handwriting uncertain. Perhaps the writer fell asleep mid-thought, dreaming of the words they could not finish. Even now, centuries later, the faint scratches of those quills seem to linger in the air. You can almost hear the rhythm of creation itself, slow and deliberate, patient as breath. The idea that knowledge could be both mortal and eternal must have comforted them. As you step outside, the light is softer, tinted with the colour of old parchment. The sound of the city returns gradually, the cry of vendors, the clip of hooves on stone, but it feels changed, quieter somehow. You realize that learning was never just about words. It was about noticing the silence between them, the quiet where understanding takes root. You glance back once more at the doorway. The wind stirs the edge of your cloak, and the smell of ink lingers faintly in the air. Somewhere inside, a lamp flickers. The library breathes on, patient and timeless, waiting for another reader to begin again. Morning light spreads across the hills outside the city, where villas stand among orchards and cypress trees. The scent of crushed figs mingles with the hum of bees. You follow a path lined with marble statues until it opens into a garden, calm and ordered yet alive. This is no ordinary home. It belongs to a Roman noble who believes that beauty and thought should share the same air. The stones seem to hold faint memories of gatherings beneath these vines. Musicians once sat beneath awnings, playing gentle melodies while guests reclined on cushions. Wine glowed like amber in the sun. Servants moved quietly, refilling cups, scattering petals on the pathways, and ensuring that conversation flowed as freely as the fountain's water. It feels effortless, but every detail is deliberate. The Romans planned their leisure as carefully as their wars. Their hosts learned to balance elegance with comfort, to create spaces that reminded guests that life could be both fleeting and sweet. The sound of laughter, the scent of herbs, the way sunlight filtered through vines, all were part of the same art. Look closely, and you can almost hear the soft murmur of philosophy drifting through the courtyard. It was common for dinner to blend thought with pleasure. A poet might read a few new lines. A philosopher might raise a question about the soul or virtue. The talk would meander like the breeze between them, circling but never breaking. What catches the eye, though, are the smaller gestures. Before each meal, guests wash their hands in perfumed water poured by attendants. Between courses, they chewed mint leaves to cleanse the palate. Some hosts released doves scented with myrrh to flutter through the air, leaving trails of fragrance behind. The whole evening became a tapestry of the senses, taste, touch, and scent woven into memory. No one really agrees on whether these gatherings were truly moments of wisdom or simply performances of grace. Ancient letters praise them as schools of thought, while others mock them as excuses for indulgence. The truth probably floats between the two. Pleasure, when done right, was a form of discipline for them, not waste. You wander past a table set for guests. The plates gleam in the sunlight, and the cups, carved from translucent glass, catch the light like fragments of dawn. The tablecloth is embroidered with vines, its folds smelling faintly of cedar. Somewhere nearby, someone plucks the strings of a lyre, testing the tune that will accompany the meal. A servant carries a tray of figs and cheese, moving as silently as the breeze. You hear laughter again, the low, warm kind that comes easily in company. In that sound, the centuries collapse, and you can almost imagine yourself among them, another guest waiting for the first course. It's touching to realize that hospitality, even then, meant more than abundance. It was an act of respect, an unspoken promise that everyone at the table belonged. The host ensured that no one's cup ever emptied, not because of wealth, but because of gratitude. The gesture mattered more than the gold. As the light shifts, the music softens. A storyteller begins to speak, describing a sailor lost at sea who dreams of returning to Rome. The listeners close their eyes, lulled by the rhythm of the words. Perhaps they knew, even then, that stories were their own kind of nourishment. Somewhere near the fountain, a small bronze statue drips water from a jar into the pool below. The sound is steady and delicate. It blends with the faint rustle of fabric, the soft laughter of guests, the faraway song of birds. Every detail seems designed to remind you that life can be gentle. You take a sip of wine, letting it rest on your tongue. It tastes of honey and smoke. Around you, the garden seems to shimmer, as though the air itself remembers the warmth of that long-ago evening. Maybe this was what the Romans meant by otium, the art of unhurried thought, not idleness, but the space to breathe, to let the mind wander as freely as water through a fountain. In this stillness, you understand why they built their villas facing the sunset. Every ending could be beautiful if one learned to see it slowly. The last notes of the lyre fade into the hush of twilight. The servants light more lamps, and the first stars appear over the hills. The villa glows softly, holding its own little world of calm. You rise to leave, carrying the taste of that peace with you, the quiet proof that beauty, once noticed, never really leaves. The sky turns a gentle silver as you wander toward a temple standing quiet above the city. The steps are cool beneath your feet, and the marble glows faintly where it meets the first touch of dawn. Pigeons circle lazily over the columns. The air smells of rain and stone, clean and faintly sweet, as if the world itself has been washed and left to dry. Inside, light slips through a single opening in the roof, falling onto the statue of a goddess. The figure is taller than life, yet her face is calm, almost human. Her hands hold nothing, as if even power has learned to rest. You notice tiny veins in the marble, soft grey lines like threads under skin. The sculptor left them there deliberately, to remind every viewer that perfection is only an idea. It is said that the Romans understood worship through texture as much as through prayer. A temple was meant to be felt, the chill of the floor, the grain of the column, the echo of a step beneath a vaulted ceiling. Even silence had weight here. To stand before the gods was to feel both humbled and comforted. A priest moves through the hall, sprinkling water from a clay bowl. Each drop lands with a sound so soft it's almost imaginary. Nearby, a woman leaves an offering of bread and figs on a low altar. Her gesture is simple, almost shy. She touches the statue's foot and whispers something meant for no one else. Outside the temple, craftsmen sit at their stalls carving small images of the goddess into ivory, bronze, and clay. They work quietly, their tools clicking in soft rhythm. You pick up one of the tiny figures. Its face is gentle, the same expression as the larger statue inside. You realize that faith, in this world, could fit both in a temple and in the palm of a hand. The idea of beauty was never separate from devotion. Artists here believed that form could carry spirit, that the human body itself was divine geometry. In every temple, in every street, sculpture gave shape to something invisible. The gods were reminders, not rulers. They watched without demanding. There is an old story told about a sculptor who refused to sign his work. When asked why, he said that marble already knew its own name, and he had only helped it remember. Maybe he was right. The lines and shadows around you feel less like invention and more like revelation, as if the stone had simply chosen to speak. For a moment, you stand still, letting the cool air rise from the floor through your feet. The faint scent of smoke drifts in from a brazier, mingling with the resin of pine. The flame moves in slow breaths, each flicker a pulse of gold. You can almost believe the goddess herself breathes with it. Time in temples did not run forward the way it does outside. Here, every second folds into another until everything feels both ancient and new. People once came to ask for luck, for rain, for healing, but many came just to be quiet. To step inside was to be reminded of proportion, human against stone, breath against eternity. You walk around the statue once more and trace the carving at its base. The letters are faint now, worn smooth by centuries of fingertips. They spell a single word: Pax, peace. It glows softly in the light, not as command, but as invitation. Outside, the city wakes again. Hooves strike the stones, and voices rise from the streets below. The smell of baking bread drifts upward through the morning air. The temple seems to exhale with the day, releasing its silence back into the world. You look once more at the statue through the open doors. The light on her face has changed. It glows warmer now, alive with the reflection of sunrise. For a heartbeat, she seems almost to smile. Maybe the sculptor meant her to, or maybe it's only the way the light falls. Some truths don't need deciding. You step back onto the street. The marble under your hand still feels cool, and the sound of the fountain nearby hums softly. The city stretches before you, full of noise, colour, and breath, yet a small calm stays with you, the quiet reminder that beauty, once seen, becomes a kind of prayer that never ends. The day softens into evening as you wander through a neighbourhood of small houses clustered along a quiet street. The noise of the city fades behind you, replaced by the sound of cooking, children laughing, and the faint pluck of a lute from an open window. A thin column of smoke curls from a chimney, carrying the scent of lentils, garlic, and bread just pulled from the fire. You pause at a doorway where an old woman sits weaving. Her hands move with a patience that seems older than she is. The thread glimmers red and gold in the fading light. She nods once, offering a quiet smile before turning back to her loom. The fabric she works on isn't for a temple or a noble house, but for her grandson's wedding. In that small gesture, you see what kept Rome alive long after battles ended: the steady rhythm of ordinary love. Even the humblest home had its small shrine. Inside, oil lamps flickered before clay figurines of ancestors. The figures were simple, worn smooth by time, yet treated with the tenderness one might give to living relatives. Children learned to greet them each morning, touching the edge of the altar before running out to play. In the corner of one house, a man carves a tiny wooden horse. His daughter watches, chin resting in her palms, eyes wide with concentration. He finishes, hands it to her, and she squeals softly. The toy is nothing more than scrap wood, but she cradles it as if it were alive. That small moment carries more warmth than any monument could hold. It is said that the Romans marked their days not by hours but by habits. Bread baked at sunrise, prayers whispered at noon, lamps lit at dusk. The rhythm repeated itself through generations until life itself became a kind of poem. The empire changed, but the pattern did not. Somewhere nearby, a group of neighbours gather in a courtyard. They share a pot of wine and talk about the harvest. The conversation drifts from weather to gossip to laughter. No record survives of their words, yet you can almost hear the tone. Gentle, teasing, alive with affection. History may forget names, but it never forgets voices like these. It's a touching thought that most of what made Rome human happened in places like this, not in marble halls, but in courtyards filled with the smell of stew and the creak of old chairs. The city's grandeur depended on the quiet strength of people who never thought of themselves as part of history. The older woman from earlier has finished her weaving. She hangs the cloth near the door, where the wind moves through it softly. Her cat curls up at her feet, tail flicking once before going still. Across the street, someone hums a lullaby to a child, the melody steady and low. The tune has no name, but it might be the oldest song in the world, the sound of one heart trying to comfort another. You notice the walls of these homes are painted with simple scenes, trees, rivers, a few birds mid-flight. The colours are fading, yet they still hold warmth. Perhaps the painters meant to remind themselves of the countryside they left behind when they came to the city. Every brushstroke feels like homesickness turned into beauty. A breeze drifts through, carrying a faint chill. Someone calls from an open window for their family to come inside before the evening cools. The street grows quieter, though the laughter lingers like an aftertaste. Lamps are lit one by one, each flame a little heartbeat in the dusk. There's a story, almost forgotten, of a woman who baked one extra loaf of bread every evening. She left it on the windowsill in case a traveller passed by. No inscription marks her name, but in a way, her kindness is more lasting than any emperor's decree. Maybe the city's greatness was never measured in walls or conquests, but in these small acts of grace repeated endlessly, like a prayer. You walk past the last house, where the road opens to a view of olive trees against the dimming sky. The air is cool now, filled with the smell of earth and smoke. The lamps flicker behind you, golden dots in the dark. For a moment, everything feels suspended. The laughter, the warmth, the simplicity of being alive. Maybe that is what endurance truly means. Not power, not empire, but the quiet courage to make the same meal, sing the same song, and love the same people, day after day. The city will rise and fall, yet the rhythm of family will keep time long after the marble has turned to dust. You turn back once more. The old woman has gone inside. The street is still, and the night deepens like a slow breath. The wind moves gently through the empty lane, carrying the last traces of warmth toward the stars. Night has finally settled over the city. The air feels soft, almost heavy with quiet. You stand on a hill overlooking Rome, the lights below glowing like a net of small suns. The wind carries a mixture of scents: olive oil, smoke, and the faint sweetness of crushed flowers. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then silence folds the sound away. The city seems to hold its breath, resting after a long day that began 2,000 years ago. You can see the outlines of temples, arches, and baths glimmering in the moonlight. The Tiber winds through them like a ribbon of silver. For a moment, everything feels both near and impossibly distant. You imagine how it must have looked when torches burned instead of lamps, when the streets echoed with carts and sandals, when the language you know only from books was still the living rhythm of breath and conversation. Below, a watchman walks slowly along the wall, his footsteps steady against the stones. He carries a small lantern that sways with every movement. His duty is simple: to keep the peace while the city sleeps. He hums to himself, perhaps to stay awake, perhaps to fill the space between the stars. The Romans believed that night was not absence but renewal. They thought the world healed itself in sleep, just as the body did. Some families left their windows open so that the dreams of the household could wander out and return lighter by dawn. Others burned herbs, sage, rosemary, thyme, believing the smoke carried away illness and bad memories. You watch the faint trails rise from scattered rooftops below, weaving together like the city's second breath. A few lamps still burn in windows. In one, an old man writes by candlelight. His hand trembles slightly as he copies a passage from a scroll. He pauses often, not out of weariness, but reverence. Every word feels alive under his fingers. In another house, a child whispers a story to a doll, then falls asleep mid-sentence, the way children always have. You can almost feel the heartbeat of the city, slow and steady. Even at its quietest, Rome is alive. Somewhere in the darkness, someone stirs the ashes of a dying fire, someone else murmurs a prayer, and in that chorus of small, unseen motions, the empire continues to exist, not in marble or conquest, but in persistence. There is a place at the hill's edge where the wind moves through a grove of cypress trees. The sound it makes is low and musical, like water running beneath the ground. You sit there for a while, listening. The earth itself seems to hum, a deep rhythm that might be memory or dream. It is easy to forget that centuries are made from moments like this. Someone long ago may have stood exactly where you are now, listening to the same wind, thinking that the empire would last forever. Maybe they were right in a way. Stone crumbles, but the desire for stillness endures. The moon climbs higher, silvering the roofs and the river below. You close your eyes, breathing in the night. The air feels cool against your face, as if time itself has leaned close. The past no longer feels distant, it feels like something resting just beside you, waiting for you to be quiet enough to notice. You think of the people you've met in this journey: the bakers, the merchants, the soldiers, the poets, the women who sang at dawn, the children who laughed by fountains. Each one left a thread of their life in the fabric of this place. When woven together, they form something vast, a whisper that outlived every empire. Somewhere behind you, the first hint of morning begins to rise. The darkness lightens from black to blue, and the city stirs again. The night's breath fades, replaced by the promise of another day. You take one last look at Rome sleeping below. The lamps flicker out, one by one. The sound of a rooster carries faintly through the air. You breathe deeply, and the world seems to pause between night and day, memory and dream. Perhaps that is how all histories end, not with triumph or loss, but with rest. The empire sleeps now, and so should you. The wind softens, the stars blur, the city's glow dims until it becomes a single point of warmth in the distance. Your eyes grow heavy. Every sound fades, replaced by the quiet rhythm of your own breath. The story settles around you like a blanket. You let go, floating in that endless hush where time no longer matters. The stone, the river, the streets, the voices, they all drift away, becoming one slow pulse of peace. Rome, eternal and silent, hums softly in the dark. Now the story grows faint, like smoke curling into the sky. The streets that once rang with laughter have fallen still. The fountains murmur to themselves, their voices softer than dreams. Every doorway holds a trace of warmth. Every stone remembers a footprint. The world feels slower now, wrapped in silver and quiet. You imagine the last candle being snuffed out somewhere deep within the city. The flame flutters once, then disappears. What remains is the echo of calm, the steady pulse that connects centuries to this moment. Even the air seems to breathe more gently. The moon drifts lower, brushing the rooftops, painting every window in pale light. The river carries reflections away, whispering to the sea that Rome still sleeps peacefully. The wind touches your face, cool and kind, as if to say that the story is finished, but its peace remains. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on that slow current. Feel your body loosen, your breath grow long and easy. The sounds around you soften until there is only quiet. The city dissolves into mist, the past folds into stillness, and time itself closes its eyes. Somewhere, deep within that silence, the heart of Rome continues to beat slow, patient, eternal. You rest beside it, part of its rhythm now, part of the hush that lingers when stories end. Good night.